Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for taking time to attend the webinar by HP and Microsoft. In today's session, we will learn how to strengthen your organization's security with HP and Microsoft multi-layered security solutions. This is the agenda for today. So for the first 5 minutes, we have some housekeeping rules to talk about. And from 10:05 to 10:45 a.m., we have Clement to talk to us about firmware vulnerabilities with live demonstrations. And from 10:45 to 11:30 a.m., we have Clement, Adesh, Puvandiran, and Sastri will talk to us about firmware security, deep dive panel discussion with firmware and security experts. And from 11:30 to 12, we have Priyanka to talk to us about cloud security on threat actors with tactics, techniques, and procedures. And from 12 to 12:15, we have Noel and Co to present with us on Bit IT track sneak peek on food in retail industry thriving with work from home. And lastly, from 12:15 to 1:30, we have Ama, Chua, Kenny, Ko, and Noel to speak to us about end-to-end multi-layered security from on-premises protection to Azus and cloud. Before we begin, we'd like to go through a few housekeeping rules. Firstly, please ensure that you are in a non-disruptive environment during the webinar session and put your mobile devices on silent mode. Secondly, please note that we'll be muting all our attendees during the presentation. After we finish, if you wish to talk to our speakers, please raise your hand and we'll unmute your microphone. If you have any questions along the way, please submit your questions in the chat window and we'll answer them as soon as possible. Alternatively, if you wish to ask a question, please raise your hand and our speakers will address it when we can. Please refrain from unmuting yourself to ask questions while the presentation is ongoing. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded for audit purposes as well. We'd like to share with you on some key features you will need to participate in today's webinar. If you hover to the bottom of your window, there's a control bar. On a control bar, you should see a few icons. Firstly, we'd like to talk about the chat icons. If you have any questions, please submit in the chat box and our speakers will address it. Alternatively, if you wish to ask a question, please click on the raise hand icon and we'll get to you as soon as possible. Thirdly, if our speakers have anything to share, you can send the message in the chat windows and we'll be able to retrieve it from there. Lastly, the link for the post-webinar survey will also be sent in the chat and you can click on it to submit your feedback. Familiarized with the features and ready to begin, we'd like to introduce our speakers for today. We have with us Clement. Clement is the CEO from Cybersecurity, Sandiran Berhad. Next, we have Adesh. Adesh is a Regional Sales Director of Global Accounts, Sales and Marketing from Intel Technology Asia. Next up, we have Puvandiran. Puvandiran is the Regional Sales Director of Compute Solutions from HPE. Sastri is a Senior Partner Technology Strategist from Microsoft. Us, Priyanka. Priyanka is a Cyber Security Consultant from Cybersecurity Sandira Berhad. Next up, we have Noel. Noel is a Technology Specialist from Mayen Sandira Berhad. Follow up with Ko. Ko is an Assistant IT Manager. And our 8 speakers for today, Ama. Ama is an Individual Technical Consultant. And we have with us too, Kenny. Kenny is a Technology Specialist in Hybrid Cloud. And lastly, Chua. Chua is a pre-sales consultant in eGate messaging. And without further ado, let's welcome Clement to start his presentation. Clement, please.
Hi guys, good morning. Welcome on board. Right, I can see that the work from home is actually reversed in the back. Right, okay, right. Welcome guys. So that's what happens when work from home goes a little bit messed up, right? Okay, right. Okay, guys, welcome on board. I'll actually fix that one in the back. All right. Okay, guys, welcome on board for work from home 2021. Okay, jokes apart. Jokes apart. We're very happy to invite and have all of you on the stage. We started this in 2020 when I and Noel had that conversation. So Noel is here to share that journey that we started and what are we going to do today. Noel, to you, buddy.
right? So can you guys see my slides?
Yeah, we can, Noel.
Okay, great, great. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being so punctual. All right, I could see that even like 15 minutes, half an hour before the session, there were already people waiting. Right, as Clement shared, we started this last year. So the year before, we actually had quite an intense, if you want, session. So want to welcome you personally, right, to the session. So you get to know me along the way. All right. So it's not important that I go through these details, but more importantly, I welcome you from the bottom of my heart to be present with us. And obviously, this particular track that we are covering today is what we call the cybersecurity track. So back in June the 16th, we actually had the hybrid IT track, right? So in this cybersecurity track, we want to focus on helping you build an adaptive multi-layered security capability within your organization. And of course, those of you who are partners to HPE and Microsoft, we welcome you to hopefully be able to pick up some of these capabilities so that you can add on to your offerings, your portfolios. So last year we had a session after session. In fact, Clement had a very intense cybersecurity uh, set of sessions, right? And he had really, really good speakers from the region. Right. And this year we decided to take a slightly different approach. So August the 5th today, right, we are going to take on, if you want, a little bit of what we did last year, which you will see that, but we wanted to feature some important capabilities from our partners, if you want, right, in the industry, right, namely HPE themselves, right, from a regional perspective. And of course, we have Intel and we also have Microsoft. Right? How can we do this event without Microsoft, right? So that's the point. But not forgetting, we also had another track last year called Biz IT. We have not forgotten this track because this track is a very important track that allows us to bring together, right, the importance of IT and how it can journey side by side as a trusted advisor to the business. Right. So last year we had some really, really good speakers as well. In fact, we have the IT director for Mydin, right? Together, I did a session on shoestring IT strategy, right, to survive COVID-19. And I know many of you probably back then in June last year probably hope that by now we will have opened up, we have gone back to our previous normal, right? Well, that's why work from home 2021 is here because we knew that that's not going to happen. All right. So we are hoping that this event will kick off in September. But during our break at about midday today, we are going to give you a sneak peek of what we are planning for this IT session in September. All right. So stay with us. All right. And of course, with that, I wanted to pass you back to Clement, right, to get started on his piece. And later, I will share some of the other messages that I have in store for you. Back to you, Clement.
Thanks, Noel. Thank you. Right, guys. So let's get started. I'm going to actually share my screen for you, and then we take it right from there. Okay. So here we go. Um, as Noel mentioned, we have put up an interesting stack of content for you today, guys. And what we have done here is we have recorded the entire session. So, right. So while the recording is playing, we are free to take your questions. So the moment you have a question, drop it out in the chat box. We all gonna actually reply to those questions, right? So we have a panel of speakers and our community members and our friends across who can answer your questions. So if you have questions, please drop it in your chat box while the session is playing. Okay, let's start with the firmware security. All right, we decided to have this firmware security topic because the last 1.5 years we are seeing a lot of attack, not only here in Malaysia, throughout the world, on a layer which has not been often looked into. It's a it's a layer called as firmware where we don't know what is happening, right? So we'll spend the next 45 minutes to understand what is this firmware, UEFI, secure boot, and how it is taking over our infrastructure and our enterprises in totality without us knowing anything about it, how hackers are controlling it completely, right? So we're going to see that. So let's start. Good morning, friends. Welcome to Work from Home 2021 once again, guys. And I'm here with you to talk about firmware security, something that we don't think about. Okay, so before that, let me introduce myself. I'm Clement, the Chief Executive Officer for Cybertronium. We were formerly called as Kapagam Education Services India and Berhad. Right? With the 20 years plus experience in IT and cybersecurity, those are all the awards given by multiple governments and in the region and across. So I've been actually listed twice in a row in 2021 and 2020 as the top 20 cybersecurity influencers and professional around the globe. All right, so you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn and let's grow together. Okay, that's off. Let's get going on the firmware, guys. Before we get started, right? So when I talk to a lot of people, they always have like, what is a firmware? What is a UEFI? Secure boot. So a lot of people might have confusion on the basics. So what I thought was, let me start with basics. Okay, step 0, let's learn certain terminologies that you're gonna keep on hearing throughout the next 35 to 45 minutes, okay? So let's understand some basics, right? So, okay, so these are the few things that I'm gonna actually cover with you. So by now, most of us know the threats of malware, ransomware, DDoS, and man-in-the-middle attacks. But one often overlooked weakness is firmware. Firmware attacks represent a risk to essentially every electrical device, from computers to coffee machines, from air-conditioned units to potentially autonomous vehicles. In a year of historic challenges, 2020 saw firmware and hardware issues become one of the most active areas of enterprise security. APT and ransomware threat actors targeted enterprise VPNs because everyone worked from home. The widespread boot hole vulnerability put virtually all Windows and Linux devices at risk for boot kits. And some of the most popular malware and ransomware added firmware-specific capabilities, including the notorious LoJax and TrickBot. So now let us delve into some basics before I ring the bell louder on the rising challenge of firmware attacks. So let's start, okay? What is a firmware? Firmware is essentially the foundational code within a device. Independent of the operating system, firmware is the first code to run and can modify or subvert the operating system and applications that run at a higher levels. This makes firmware a single point of failure that, when compromised, can allow attackers to evade security controls at those higher layers and silently persist on a device. You understand the problem here, guys? If a firmware is compromised, your antivirus has no choice. Your antivirus has no view about what's happening on your firmware level. Maybe your EDR also don't know what's happening on the firmware level. Right? So this is true across critical components like your unified extensible firmware interface, in short, UEFI, or your server baseboard management controllers. Like every server might have their own respective baseboard management controllers, as well as peripheral devices, trusted platform modules, and storage devices. None of them will have any access to it because when that guy is compromised, a firmware is compromised, all the security layers that you are putting in place will not work. Now, how many firmwares do I have? The average laptop will run dozens of firmware on boot up. An average server might run around 20 or more minimum. Each of these firmware components can run millions of lines of codes, and each is developed by a myriad of vendors in a complex supply chain. We'll talk about the supply chain effort later, right? But it's a complex supply chain. Multiple components come from multiple people. The number of devices alone can be overwhelming, my dear friends. When you begin to consider every server, switch, laptop, smartphone, etc., that connects to the network. But the scope grows exponentially. The vast majority of devices also rely on an array of components and subcomponents, each of which also has its own firmware and supply chain. So you see the integrated effect? The result, a very broad and deep attack surface into which organizations have very little, if any, visibility. So you understand the firmware? It's the base that runs everything. OS runs on top of the firmware, and your defenses run on top of the OS. So anything that happens on the firmware level, it's totally oblivious, no visibility on the higher layers. Hence, the attackers are putting in all kind of malwares on the firmware level, so they can retain persistence without even anyone knowing about it. We have seen tons of attacks. 2021 saw, or rather 2020 saw a lot of attacks that's continuing in 2021. We're going to dwell deeper on it as we go on. But let's go to the second thing on our basics, UEFI. What is this UEFI? UEFI has become a prominent technology that is embedded within designated chips on modern day computer systems. A UEFI replaces the legacy BIOS. It is typically used to facilitate the machine's boot sequence and load the operating system while using a feature-rich environment to do so. At the same time, it has become the target of threat actors to carry out exceptionally persistent attacks. One such attack has been used widely, where a compromised UEF firmware image that contained a malicious implant, and this implant served as a means to deploy additional malware on the victim computers. So the guy goes in, and then he actually starts pulling out additional payloads and malwares from the command and control server. This attack is widely known as mosaic regressor, found to be used by Chinese threat actors. Right? I'll show you a similar demo later today. So we understood what is a firmware and what is a UEFI, where the problems are. So let me actually summarize them as threats to the boot process. So we know what is a firmware, we know what is a UEFI. Now, what are the threats to the boot process? The boot process is one of the most fundamentally important aspects of security for any device. It relies on a variety of firmware that controls how a device's various components and peripherals are initialized and ultimately coordinates the loading of the operating system itself. In general, the earlier the code is loaded, the more privileged it is. See, this is a very important point. The earlier the code is loaded, the more privileged it is. If this process is compromised, attackers can control how the operating system is loaded and subvert all higher layer security controls. And they can load whatever they want to load in that sequence. Research as identified ransomware in the wild using malicious UEFI bootloaders as a way to take control of your machine at the time of boot. So you don't see anything. You just see a blue screen which says that, yeah, all your data is encrypted, pay me money. Your OS did not even load up. Your boot is taken over. The boot sequence have been taken over. Previously, threat actors used malware tampering with legacy OS bootloaders. But now they are meddling with the UEFI. They are even meddling with a secure boot. Secure boot? What is it? What is UEFI secure boot? A UEFI secure boot was originally developed by the UEFI forum as a way to protect the boot process from attacks. Right? It is not something new, guys. We always create something to protect, and that gets hacked. For example, we had problem with HTTP, then we went to HTTPS. In the HTTPS, we had SSL version 1 problem, version 2 problem, SSL version 3 problem, TLS 1.0 problem, 1.1 hanging out there, 1.2. So something that we put in place to protect might start having issues. So it's normal. Okay. So UEFI was originally developed to make the boot process free from attacks. So UEFI secure boot is a standard. It's a standard for all PCs and servers. The goal is to prevent malicious codes from being introduced into the boot process by cryptographically checking each piece of firmware and software before it is run. Any code not recognized as valid is not executed in the boot process. So this is a secure boot that you will also find in all the Windows 10 and all the Windows servers and all the Linux distributions too, right? So in Linux, we call that as GRUB, Grand Unified Boot Loader. So in almost every modern Linux distribution, GRUB2 is the bootloader that loads and transfers control to the operating system. So with that, we have understood the basics of the firmware ecosystem, right? What is a firmware? What is a UEFI? What's the threat to the boot process? What did we put in place to handle that threat? And from a Windows perspective, as well as on the Linux ecosystem with the GRUB2. So that would have set up a stage for us to go beyond now to understand what kind of attacks are happening on our firmwares, who are all the threat actors who are working on it, and how can we handle it, okay? Come on, guys, let me take you in. All right, now, so as you already know, firmware is the foundation of the enterprise tech stack. Everything runs on top of it. Your switches, your routers, your servers, your endpoints, everything runs on firmware, right? So with the attacks that is happening, Gartner came out and said, firmware is the next endpoint battleground. Because earlier, the memory was the endpoint battleground. When in older generation, if you call me generation 1, your hard disk was the battleground. Generation 2, your memory was the battleground. Generation 3, firmware is our new battleground on the endpoint for advanced adversaries. And we are seeing that attack across. I have picked up a few things for you over here, right? Ransomware is attacking UEFI firmware. Suspected Chinese hackers exploited Pulse Secure VPNs. SonicWall warns of imminent ransomware attacks targeting firmware flaw. This is July, just last month. Security vulnerabilities alert and firmware patches in Zyxel networks. So everyone are actually seeing the attacks happening. The entire industry of firmware patches, firmware security has come up in forefront, which is what Gartner is saying. Guys, It's high time. The battle has started. Get prepared. All right? So, just to give you the summary of all those components in the firmware, the largest blind spot, guys. All right? So every component has its own vulnerabilities. Every component has its own vulnerabilities. These are all the known vulnerabilities in every component. Well, the respective firmware players would have actually given you patches, but are your devices being patched? When did you last check that? Are you even looking at it? Is your security operations center even looking at the firmware level? So we have a total darkness in that area, right? You look at the number of vulnerabilities. These are documented ones. How about the 0 days? The unknowns, right? Now, here we go, next, right? So firmware is a blindness spot, and these are all the threat actors. These are all the threat actors that are exploiting firmware. APT41, right? These are all our campaigns and threat actors, what you are seeing. Guys, this arena is filling up. A lot of firmware exploits are being sold in dark web. And it's not very expensive, guys. A couple of $1,000, you can get one. So the ecosystem is getting populated. It had only LoJax, it had Trick Boot, it had only few earlier. But within a year, in 2020 plus alone, we got that filled up. And 2021 has come up with few more additional stuffs. So the malwares and the attacks based on firmware is growing every second, right? Okay, so be aware of it. Now, let's move on next. What are the important firmware threats and vulnerabilities that affected the industry and the enterprises throughout the world in 2020? The first one is VPN. This is what I actually told you earlier in the first slide. The attackers were targeting VPN devices because we were working from home. When we were in the office, we had multiple layers of defenses to protect us. Something to inspect, something to detect. But when you're back home, we are totally on the VPN trunk. And when devices get compromised on the firmware level, the malwares can move through VPNs. That's one way. But if the VPNs themselves get compromised, gone, right? So VPN vulnerabilities have become a top target of state-sponsored actors, including groups from China, Russia, Iran, and all the ransomware campaigns like Revel, Netwalker, Maze. So all of them started to add capabilities of firmware attacks into their ransomware, right? So VPN attacks skyrocketed in 2020. The next one is our TrickBot, a very notorious malware. It's a highly modular Trojan that is particularly notable for its ability to gain administrator privileges. It has Mimikatz embedded in it for dumping all the usernames and passwords and hashes. Right? It has a lot of capabilities. And it also has a lateral movement capability, both your east-west and north-south, horizontal and vertical lateral movement. And it can deliver additional malware payloads. So TrickBot itself is a highly notorious modular Trojan. And they went ahead and added a component, a module in 2020 called as Trick Boot. This particular module checks devices for firmware vulnerabilities that can allow attackers to read, write, or erase the device's UEFI or BIOS firmware. So I can start implanting malwares inside the malware code
inside the UEFI firmware codes. Or I can remove the firmware and put an old firmware inside. See, when you are signing firmwares, to confirm that the firmwares belong to a company that has issued it. Okay? You can cryptographically sign it, the secure boot, right? But you had a vulnerability in your earlier version, and then you gave a patch. The earlier version is also signed cryptographically with your signature, correct? So even if you have patched to the new version, if an attacker comes in and he puts the old version of the firmware inside, will it still recognize? It will still recognize. Cryptographically, will it match? It will match. So if I can go into the firmware and I can manipulate these load sequences, I can load the old firmware version of the supplier, which is cryptographically signed by the supplier, and then exploit that vulnerability. Does it make sense? Right? So the secure boot can be questioned. Right? Attacks, right? I'll show you a demo of compromising a firmware with the secure boot enabled on a fully patched Windows 10 machine coming up. Okay? Right. So you now understood how the trick boot works on the trick bot malware. Pretty tricky, guys, right? I was actually going for a tongue twister with the trick boots and the trick bots when I was actually preparing the slide deck for you guys. Okay, now here we go. The newly discovered UEFI implants are in the wild. One such guy is Mosaic Regressor. This guy is notorious for maintaining persistence in target organizations, evading security controls that you have put in place, including your EDRs, XDRs, right? Your antivirus stands no chance there at all, right? And deliver additional malicious payloads. And in many cases, the threats were there for many years, and we had not picked up in the past at all because we were never looking into the firmware arena. Now, the next one is pervasive boot hole vulnerability. Our partners, Eclipsium, they discovered a vulnerability known as boot hole, affecting most Windows and Linux-based systems. This vulnerability allows attacker to gain arbitrary code execution during the boot process, even when secure boot is enabled. Almost all the signed versions of GRUB2 are vulnerable, meaning virtually all your Linux distribution is affected. Were you aware of that? Have you patched it? Right? So, friends, something very important is happening around us. There is a new generation of attacks are coming up. So let's get ready. Let's put defenses, let's put the right softwares and the solutions and technologies that can manage the firmware for us. We are going to talk about it as we go on, right? Let's move on. So I spoke about the supply chain, the complexity of the supply chain. There are tens and tens, sometimes hundreds of firmwares in a device, each one coming from different vendors, sub-vendors, millions of lines of code. Devices can be modified or compromised in the supply chain even before the eventual owner ever receives the item, receives the laptop or the switches or routers. It can be already manipulated. It can be already compromised before it reaches our hand because there are too many people in the supply chain. The recent Breaking Trust project provided a detailed analysis of 115 supply chain attacks and disclosures over the past 10 years, not only in 2020, past 10 years. Backdoors have been found in enterprise firewalls, Huawei telecom gears, and even IP security cameras that we might have deployed in our financial institutions, in our government agencies, in our corporate offices. So all of them have been found to have implants even before they were delivered to in our hands, right? So the supply chain kind of an attack is happening across. We have heard about SolarWinds, right? Last year. From a software engineer who was compromised on his computer, codes, malware lines of codes getting into the into the SolarWinds patch module, and how that patch module was actually pushed to thousands and thousands of customers who got infected through an official patch that was delivered. And from that infection, the malware started downloading additional payloads, taking over thousands and thousands of customers of SolarWinds, including Microsoft, and a whole lot of big guys on it. Right? Supply chain attacks happen all over. What you're seeing now is a firmware-based supply chain attacks. And there is one more that came up very recently in 2021, which involves Dell computers. BIOS disconnect. Right? Why is it BIOS disconnect? Because they have a service, a module called as BIOS Connect. Okay, let me explain this to you. So Eclipsium, again, our partners Eclipsium, discovered multiple vulnerabilities affecting 129 Dell models via Dell remote OS recovery and firmware update capabilities. This happened in June 2021. Eclipsium worked with Dell from February onwards all the way till June to confirm those vulnerabilities. And hence, when this information came out as a disclosure, Dell had already come up with the patches, and they have given the patches as of on 24th June 2021. The patches are all available for all Dell machines. 129 Dell models, predominantly everything that you have now as a Dell machine, that needs a patch. The chain of vulnerabilities, it wasn't one, there was chain of vulnerabilities. The TLS certificate had some issues. The connectivity to the Dell.com in the back had some issues, which allowed the man-in-the-middle attacks to come in. So it was multiple vulnerabilities in there with a CVSS score of 8.3. And it allows privileged network adversary to impersonate Dell.com and gain arbitrary code execution at the BIOS level or a UEFI level of the affected device. And then an adversary can control the device's boot process and subvert the operating system and a higher layer security controls. Right? It affects 129 Dell models. Now, what was the core of this vulnerability is Dell Support Assist. Those who are using Dell machines, including this computer that I'm actually talking to you, right? We all know Dell Support Assist is an overarching support solution that comes pre-installed on the machine. It covers a range of support functions such as your monitoring of hardware, software problems, and assisting with troubleshooting. If something goes haywire on your Dell machines, Support Assist comes up. You have that as an icon in your computer, in your Dell machines. The Support Assist has a feature called as BIOS Connect. Right? It allows users to perform a remote OS recovery or update the firmware on the device. The problem was on this particular feature called as BIOS Connect. BIOS Connect enables the system's BIOS to reach out to Dell's backend services over the internet. So something is connecting from the firmware all the way to the internet without we knowing, okay, but for good reasons, obviously, to update and patch their firmwares and then coordinate your update or your recovery process. So this is what this BIOS Connect does. So you look at the first picture on the top. So this is the normal behavior. So your BIOS Connect connects via the normal HTTPS TLS communications in the back to Dell.com to pull all the latest updates or recovery stuff back to the device and bring the device back if it's having a problem or update its firmware. Now, the problem is because of multiple vulnerabilities on the BIOS connect, one being the certificate issues on the connection that is going out, someone in the middle, a machine in the middle, okay, or man in the middle. The guy must be on the same network. For this to happen, the guy must be on the same network. So that's the only solace. That's the only good news that you can have. The hacker must be on the same network. For him or her to be the machine in the middle or man in the middle to intercept that connection, the request that is going out, and change that certificate to accept the attacker certificate. And then attacker can actually send in content as patches and upgrades to the firmware with an implant and take over the Dell machine. This is what is called as BIOS disconnect. Right out of the oven, just 1 month back in June, when the patches came out on 24th June 2021. Dell was pretty quick in fixing it, and they send out the patches. So if you're using Dell machines, server, laptops, anything, any Dell related stuffs, please go and check out the BIOS disconnect advisory from Dell. You will be able to find what are all the different models that are affected, and please update your firmware patches. Right. So from all that what you have seen, let me come back to where I started. Firmware is the new battleground. Whether it is your laptops, your endpoint PCs, servers, network devices, or connected devices, all of them runs on millions and millions of lines of code on a level that's below your operating system, where our classic, traditional, and advanced security technologies may not be even looking at it, right? There are some numbers that are startling that has come out in the recent studies. According to Gartner, by 2022, 70% of organizations that do not have a firmware upgrade plan in place will be breached due to a firmware vulnerability. It's not Clement's words, it's from Gartner, right? Most of the enterprises, governments, financial institutions, they hold Gartner as a Bible for every technology update. And they are the ones who are now telling that by 2022, 70% of organizations might have been compromised already. It's 2021 now, guys. We still have time. Microsoft did its part. Microsoft did a study as part of Security Signals 2020. And they found out a few things. 83% of all businesses that Microsoft did the research on have experienced a firmware attack in the past 2 years. And there are people who have started talking about it, like what you have actually heard from our ex-FBI director. There are only two types of companies: those that have been already hacked and then they know about it, and there are those that have been hacked and they don't know about it. That means everyone is compromised. The famous quote that most of the security guys use. There a similar quote has come from Mr. Azim, a partner at ISG and a former managing VP of Gartner. There are two types of companies: those who have experienced a firmware attack and those who have experienced a firmware attack but don't know it. So a firmware attack is imminent. It's already happening. Most of us might have already been compromised and we do not know about it. So we need a technology to figure out. We need a way to protect our firmwares. We need to have our incident response plans in place for firmware attacks. So firmware is a new battleground. So the actions that we need to take today, we need to establish a basic firmware inventory and visibility. Not only the machine level inventory, firmware inventory. Establish an organizational policy around firmware updates. Integrate your firmware vulnerability scans into your risk management process. Don't only scan your operating system. Don't only scan your applications. your vulnerability scans should also incorporate firmwares. Integrate firmware detection and response tools into your endpoint and your infrastructure security or resilience technologies and processes. And integrate firmware forensics into your incident response process. Make firmware risk a priority, friends, in equipment purchasing and deployment decisions. So a takeaway from my session to you is this: a simple action card. You need to get each and every one of it to put in place. If you do not know how to get this done, reach out to us at Cybertronium and we will help you through each and every step of this to start to find what kind of firmware vulnerabilities that you already have. Is there any attack that is already running without you knowing? What is your impact and how do you move from your current state to your secure state as a more resilient organization? We can help you through that process, right? So before I say ciao for you for this particular session, I want to show you a demo. I'm going to show you a demo of a firmware malware that is embedded inside a Microsoft Word document. And you open up a Word document via a phishing email or a business email compromise. You receive an email as if it is coming from your colleague or your contractors or your vendors. You open it and it infects the firmware. And it connects to a remote access tool or a remote access Trojan or RAT. Most of us would have known the remote access or command and control. So I'm going to actually do this for you, right? There are me over here talking to you, and I have another computer because I don't want to infect this computer where I'm showing you the demo. So I have another computer that has this dangerous malware that we picked up, we plucked it from the wild, right? So we have this malware ready on a Word document that I'm going to open it up. So it's on another computer. So I'm going to connect that computer and I'm going to share it to you. So you'll be able to see that computer. I'll quickly run through the defenses in that computer, okay? So you can see the secure boot is on. You can see the virus and threat protection is on. All defenses that you might already have on your machines is there on that machine. Fully patched Windows machine. All cleaned, right? Runs an EDR, Windows Defender ATP, okay? On it, on an EDR perspective, okay? Right, so everything is running on this machine here. So I'm going to show you all of that and I'm going to open up the Word document. Then I want you to introduce to my colleague, my team member, Mr. Ganesh, who is going to actually show the remote access Trojan from a hacker perspective as a command and control server. So once I show my machine, the Victor machine, and I open up the Word document, I will transfer it to Mr. Ganesh, who will then share his screen and show what has happened on his command and control side and how much of access that he has on this computer where I opened a Word document. Are we clear, guys? Are we ready for it? Okay, so here we go. Let me actually take my system off. From here, I'll stop my screen share. We come back here, right? So I'm going to actually share my screen from the Victor machine. I'm going to share my screen from the Victor machine, okay? So let me go and share my screen on the Victor machine. Share screen of my Victor machine. So you are now seeing my Victor machine, right? So this is my Victor machine. Let me quickly open up the virus and threat protection on that machine. Virus and threat protection. So if you look at the virus and threat protections right on your screen, it has picked up current threats, right? It has picked up some host file hijack that has happened on 30th July, right? So it has picked up things across. So it is a working and all of this is pretty much on. Your virus threat protection, your ransomware protection, so everything is pretty much on. Your account protection is all on. Your firewall and network protection is all on. So we have not disabled anything that has actually comes out of the box. Happen and browser control, isolated browsing, exploit protection, everything is on. Your device security, your core isolation, your security processor, the trusted platform module that I spoke to you earlier in the session, secure boot, everything is on. Okay, so right, so all the securities that you can ask for is pretty much on. Now let me start the process. So this is a simple Word document, right? So I've not made it look so genuine with a real report inside, with a real invoice inside kind of a stuff. I've just actually opened up a normal firmware document, right? So I just open up a firmware document, just a normal invoice. This can be anything. This can be anything, right? This can be anything inside here as a content. Since it's a demo, I've just made it simple, right? It can be anything. So as I've actually opened this, there is a malware that runs in that Word document. So I've opened it and I've closed it. So nothing has happened on my screen here. The screen looks perfectly clean. See, there are few things that can happen. We can open a malware and the malware can actually be flushed into your systems and it can take over your system. Sometimes it might go for a reboot. Sometimes it might not. The advanced malwares on a firmware level, like the one that we are using, doesn't ask for a reboot at all. It just goes and attaches itself. So now I want to actually transfer the control. So let me stop sharing on the victim machine. So the victim machine is right in front, or rather to the left of me here, okay, right? So I'm going to stop the sharing here and I'm going to pass the control to Ganesh. Ganesh, you on, buddy? Show us the command and control center.
Yes, let's get down to it.
So what you're seeing now is the command and control center that's happening on Ganesh's side. Ganesh, does he look like a hacker for you? Okay, right, go ahead.
Right. So very simple. Let's turn on the DC rack. Wait for Clement system to pop up. There you go. Malaysia, IP port, hardware ID, OS. It's very generic information, not to worry. The scary part comes here. You see his screen now. Same screen you saw earlier.
Oh, so is it real time? If I open up,
definitely. Please move your cursor.
Yeah, if I actually move the cursor, it actually moves. Okay, let me actually go and open up something, okay? Let me open up a notepad and say, hi, everyone. Huh. That's a real-time flow that's happening on it. Let everyone see the hi, okay?
Yeah.
There you go. Wonderful. Back to you, Ganesh.
All right. Next, we can go for websites.
Ah,
there you go.
A Chinese malware taking you to a Chinese website. Well, that's Greek and Latin for me. I know nothing about it. I don't have a Chinese girlfriend, so sorry, I can't. The only thing that is this, I have a Chinese vaccine. Maybe I can start reading Chinese later. Okay, anyway, go ahead.
Right. And then we have the scary one.
Oh my God.
There you go.
I feel now my privacy is gone, man. That's a real feed that's coming up. Why am I looking so plump? Okay, right, go ahead. Go ahead.
Right. So you can see that there's a lot more features over here. Really, really a lot more. Simple as process manager. I can kill any EDR running here. It's not an issue for me. Okay, serve other malwares.
DDoS, ransomware, yep. Password recovery, yep. Great. So guys, so this is just a quick demo for you to see how much of control that a hacker gets by you just clicking on something as simple as a Word document. Thanks, Ganesh. Thanks a lot.
No worries.
Right, so you're back with me, guys. Right, so what you have actually seen in this session is understanding the firmware threats, the firmware malwares and how they work, the attacks that are happening all over the world as we are talking, the importance of a firmware security is clearly demonstrated, right? And I've given you an action item, what you need to do, or actually what you need to put in place to make sure that your organization, your enterprise, and your devices are not compromised by a firmware malware. Thank you, friends. See you next in the panel discussion. Thanks. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have questions, drop in, reach out to Cybertronium, reach out to me via LinkedIn, and we can talk and we can assist you through this process. Thank you, guys. Good morning, friends.
All right, guys. So welcome back. Right? Welcome back, and I hope you're able to hear my voice, right? Okay. So welcome back. So we have actually witnessed the entire presentation that I have given you for 45 minutes on how the firmware is becoming a battleground. So, and I've actually put up informations about UEFI, secure boot, and all of it, right? So now I have actually placed that same question. I've actually placed the same question to our panel of experts, right? We have actually spoken separately to Mr. Puvendran from HPE, Adesh from Intel, and Shastri from Microsoft. We have asked them a lot of questions, starting from HPE on secure boot and how they are protecting it on being attacked from an ILO 5 perspective. To Adesh, we have asked a whole lot of things about the Ice Lake processors. To Shastri, we have spoken about the Microsoft security strategies, the zero trust, the acquisition of a company called as Refirm, right? So here we go with respect to that particular panel discussion for you guys, right? So we have kept it, we have organized the screen. So when Puvan is talking, you will see Adesh and Shastri's picture in there. So when Adesh speaks, you will see the other panelists as pictures. They all are there in the call today, guys. So if you have questions, you can shoot it up and we'll get the answers from them later, right? Thank you, guys. Let me actually play this across for you now.
Right. Good morning, Puvan. Thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, and we are very eager to understand HPE security ecosystem. Welcome on board, Puvan.
Yeah, thank you, Clement, and good morning to you as well. It's a pleasure for me to join you today in this discussion.
Okay, thanks, Puvan. We have just witnessed a live demo on Mosaic Regressor and UEFI implant. What are the security innovations from HPE to handle firmware-based attacks?
Yes, Clement, definitely. So with the Gen 10 servers HP released a couple of years ago, right, we released what we call the world's most secure industry standard service. And with that, we created an ecosystem called the secure compute lifecycle. So what we essentially do is to handle this kind of firmware attacks, we created our own silicon called the Silicon Root of Trust. The Silicon Root of Trust essentially binds all the essential firmware into the silicon of the server before the server is even built. So this particular silicon would contain all the different firmwares of all the key things like the management engine, innovation engine, and etc. So what it essentially does is it anchors, it creates an anchor for the boot process that's rooted in the hardware that cannot be updated or modified in any way after the server has been built. So when we combine this feature with the cryptographically secured signature, which we call the digital fingerprint, there are no accessible gaps for hackers to exploit. So basically, if a hacker inserts a virus or a compromised code or a firmware into the server firmware, the configuration of the firmware is essentially changed. Now, this creates a mismatch to the digital fingerprint that's embedded into the silicon.
All right.
So when the server boot, so basically when the server boots, ILO 5 validates the BIOS of the server and looks for the digital fingerprint of the ILO firmware that's burned into the chip. So this immutable fingerprint verifies all the firmware code, which is valid and uncompromised. Or if the validation fails at any level, because of these attacks, the ILO 5 and the silicon root of trust will not allow the server to power on. HP has a big advantage, against our competitors because we make our own silicon chip and firmware. Therefore, we are able to create that bond that cannot be broken between the two of these, unlike our competitors.
Wonderful. And I believe that cryptographic keys are somewhere hidden safely.
Yes, exactly, right. There was a recent case where Asia-based, technology company who manufactures hardware had their cryptographic key basically leaked. And hackers were able to gain that, and they created their own firmware with all this compromised firmware, and they put in that digital fingerprint in, which allowed them to, attack a lot of systems basically. In HPE's case, this particular key is securely locked in a vault, and only 2 persons in the entire organization, right, that spans hundreds of thousands of people, can access that today.
Great.
Pretty secure.
Wonderful. May I know where is it?
It's actually in Houston, Texas.
Okay. Which address it is?
I have no idea.
No idea. Oh, wonderful. Great. Okay, Puan, sure, indeed. ILO 5 is with lots of security bells and whistles, Puan. So can you mention in brief about the other key technologies that you guys have put in place?
Yeah, that's definitely. So, we break this down into 3 pillars, right? Protect, detect, and recover, in terms of securing the firmware and the servers. So in protect, we saw one of the key features was silicon root of trust. And then we have things like cryptography protection. Cryptography has 3 levels, right? Starting with high security, followed by FIPS. And then lastly, we have the CNSA, which is also known as the Commercial National Security Algorithm. This is the highest level of cryptographical protection. So additionally, we have things like server configuration lock, which is a pretty interesting feature, right? Where once the server has been built in the factory, we put a lock on it with the password, protected lock, basically, to secure it through the life cycle, through the transit life cycle, basically. You already have protection based on silicon root of trust, but this is an additional protection, which locks the actual configuration of a server. If someone as little as unplugs, a memory or even plugs in a USB device into the server, it gets detected and locked. So when the server arrives at the location and the password is inputted to unlock the server, you get all these locks and are able to see, the different changes that happened on the server. So essentially protecting the server during transit, right? Now we all know that transit is like, the most vulnerable part of the entire life cycle because
exactly
it's in hands of people who we don't even know,
right.
Basically.
Multiple layers, supply chain kind of attacks. Perfect point.
Exactly. Other features, if I may add on, are things like TPM and secure boot. These are industry standard features, basically. Right. Moving on from there, the second pillar is detect. Right. In detect, we have both compromised firmware detection as well as physical intrusion detection. So, we saw all the features related to firmware detection earlier, right? We secure them. We also have sensors, on the lid of the server and all around the server, to detect things like physical intrusion. So if there was a physical intrusion, it is also logged in the logs. So, when someone reviews the logs, they can see that, the cover of the server was opened and things like that. So we are trying to cover all the different bases in terms of the intrusion possibilities on the server, right? And then the last part, what I'd like to stress on the detect part is a secure validation, right? This occurs, the scanning, right? The runtime firmware verification occurs continuously. It's not like a one-time basis where it's only checked upon when the server is booted, but this can be scheduled on a daily basis. And, to make all this easier, we have a proactive monitoring dashboard basically built into the ILO management site. So basically, when you go into the ILO's page, you're able to look at this security tab and you're able to see all these things. It shows you the risk factor, if something has happened, and there's like an alert, which makes it easy for you, basically.
So from the ILO management, I believe there must be some kind of an API to stream the data to security operation centers to have a 24/7 monitoring on the boxes?
Yes, definitely. All HP servers today have capability to support REST APIs as well as Redfish, which is the industry standard. So we are able to, send information or get information, from any sources. So basically, third-party tools, that we integrate with, or can use things like ILO, REST APIs, or Redfish to pull this data and then display it or analyze it on their tool, basically.
Wonderful, Bhuvan. Bhuvan, as you know, the ability to recover from an attack is as important as protecting and detecting an attack. Our average mean time to respond is still hovering on hours to days. Can you provide some background into how HP helps customers recover from attacks like firmware-based or ransomware-based attacks?
Yeah. So let's cover the base on the firmware-based attack, right? So recover, because why HP, is rated very highly is because of our ability to recover. A lot of people have protect and detect, but they miss the part on recover. So we focus a lot on that as well. So when a particular attack happens and, the ILO detects this particular attack, we give the customers 3 different options they can do. The first being the ability to recover to the last known good state firmware. Basically, the last version of the firmware that was installed and validated to be good, right, which is stored in the BIOS, basically. So we allow you to recover to that. The second option being the ability to recover to the initial factory settings. So basically, you run like a full reset and you go back to the state where the server came from the factory, for you to recover. And the last one is the ability to not do anything at all. Basically, not to recover, so that you can take the server offline and conduct any kind of a forensic analytics, right, as well as all the logs that have been captured. To add on to all of this, we do offer professional services as well, for customers who need some, assistance or they need to do anything further than this. We do offer professional services as well.
Great, wonderful. What makes HP different from the competition? Other than that, you guys do everything by yourself, is there anything else?
Yes, definitely, right? I think you pointed out that factor where we make our own silicon, while all our competitors actually buy our silicon off the shelf from other vendors, and then they secure it with their solution. So they don't have the entire binding that we create with the entire server ecosystem, like like what HP does. So the secure compute lifecycle is supposed to provide you cradle to grave kind of a protection across the entire lifecycle of the server. So to be sure, right, we can't have our own, greatness. So what we did, we reached out to the industry experts, and one of them happened to be, an organization called Infusion Point, who specializes in security, detection and recovery. So what we did, we sent our servers to them for to analyze, and not just running the typical industry standard testings, but to actually run real world modern threats, like the ones you see in the news every day, right? The one we spoke about earlier, and the one where there was supposedly a Chinese chip that was implanted on a server, right, and running in one of the world's largest organizations, basically. So, those kind of actual attacks. And we came out with flying colors, right? We got a glowing recommendation, and, it validated our claim to be the world's most secure service. So, if anyone, the participant would like to know more about this, I've shared a document on this, so, through the organizers, so they can read about it. And, another point is, even the FBI recommends HP servers as the top-notch security service. So you can't get anywhere better than that, right? The FBI. And lastly, I'd like to touch upon the Marsh Cyber Catalyst designation. I know it might be alien to some people here. You might not have heard about it, but the Marsh Cyber Catalyst designation is a designation of key security products in the industry, which is then evaluated by this company called Marsh, and then they give this information out to the customer so they can make informed choices about their cyber risk. So Marsh is an industry analyst, basically in the insurance industry, where basically they analyzed all these software solutions. So they actually evaluated, hundreds of solutions in two different phases in the last 18 months, basically. And they validated 32 products, 17 products in the first phase, and a further 15 products in the second phase. And out of these 32 products, HP has 3 listings, one of the highest by a single vendor. The first product is Silicon Root of Trust, something that we've been talking about in depth earlier. And the second one is what we call the Aruba Policy Enforcement Firewall and Aruba ClearPath. These two are software-based tools, right? They are part of our network family. And the other great point is that HP is the only server hardware vendor who made it into this list, right? I'm not going to name our competitors, but you know who they are. None of them made it into that list. But the Silicon Root of Trust is in that list, and it's being highly recommended. One of the highly probably I would say recommended products in that list. And just before I close, right, I'd say the cybersecurity insurance industry today is the fastest growing insurance segment, and it's worth about $150 billion annually. So that's being as part of that recommended list is a great thing.
Wonderful, Bhuvan. Thanks a lot for sharing. Thanks a lot for enlightening us on all the different security measures and layers, the multi-layered approach that HP has put in place to make sure that firmwares are being protected, the supply chains are being actually monitored and protected. Thanks for all of that sharing, Bhuvan. Have a great day. Stay safe. See you another time. Thank you, guys.
And have a good day.
Thank you, Bhuvan.
All right. Thanks to Puvan there, who was there to help us to understand all the security layers that HP has actually put in place, and they keep on innovating over there to make things difficult for any firmware level attacks, right? Okay. And he answered a couple of those questions on the cryptological and how they try to protect it and so on and so forth. So let's go and ask similar line of questions from Ice Lake processors, how Intel sees security from their design perspective all the way in implementing those chipsets and so on and so forth, guys. So let's hear from Adesh for another 15 minutes. So each panelist gets around 15 minutes. So let's actually listen to what Adesh have to say about security, and as I pose questions to him.
Hi, Adesh. Good morning. Welcome on board.
Good morning to you.
For Work from Home 2021. Thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on board with us today to discuss about the security that has been built in at the core Intel, right? So, Adesh, with attacks skyrocketing all over the place, right? We see a lot of attacks from different levels. Earlier today, we also showcased a firmware level attack using Mosaic regressor that's been actually used by Chinese threat actors, predominantly for state attacks, kind of a stuff to attack other governments and so on and so forth. So with attacks skyrocketing, what does security mean to Intel?
Yeah, so again, first of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here on behalf of Intel and have a conversation with you and to share with you some of our capabilities that we have built in as a company into every product that we develop and have developed in the past few years and in the future that we will be developing as well. For Intel, we are focused on ensuring the security of our customers' computing environments, and we are committed to security in such a way that it has never been stronger within the company. In fact, we have got a group within the company that is focused on security at the silicon level, at the design phase, all the way through to ensuring the applications that are running on the servers when the process is designed and integrated by our vendors and OEMs, ensuring that the security is maintained at that level as well, because that's what customers want. That's what customers desire. And so we have, from our perspective, at the very foundation, we have an unwavering customer focus in everything that we do. with respect to security. There is also a very continuous innovation in technology. I mean, as we all know, security is an evolving capability that has to be integrated inside the product. And you cannot say that my product is 100% secure. And so we have a continuous technology innovation process of bringing in the capabilities inside a hardware today as well as into the future. And then we are also building in and trying to build and aiming to have a very robust set of capabilities inside the hardware. I mean, if you go back to data center practices 10 years back, 20 years back, you needed to have additional attachments inside your server in order to give you that level of security. Today, what we're doing is we are mitigating most of the security attacks through the silicon itself by ensuring and having the capabilities built in the silicon for us. And so we are the only company in the world that has a security pledge where we have a clear focus on designing the products right from day one with security in mind. And it's not just with the designers, but it's with the manufacturing. It's with the team that is on the software side, the team that's working with the open source ecosystem as well. Everyone in the company has got this security mindset that has been built inside the organization. So for us, when you say what does security mean to Intel, it is in everything that we do, everything that we develop, design, and sell to our customers.
Wonderful, Adesh. Great. So people, process, technology embedded straight into every inch of Intel. Okay, great. Right, good. So Intel has been creating and innovating server-based technologies for a very long time, right?
Right.
In the heart of innovations, the computers and the server spectrum for a very long time. So how does Intel enable security at the core or at the foundation level?
So we actively work to deliver security without sacrificing performance. That is extremely important because many times questions are raised by customers and developers whether you are compromising performance at the core level or at the instruction level because you're adding in more security overhead. And so our goal is to give you security without sacrificing performance. And so we work with our customers and industry partners where we can achieve levels of secure performance people expect and deliver the technology they trust. Our goal is to ensure a critical base of protection across the platform, focusing on identity and integrity. And Intel has a very long history of developing and delivering technology to help ensure the platform comes up correctly when it's booted up and it runs as expected. So our security engines, have been used over 1 billion times worldwide, right, across a range of implementations or hardware implementations by our OEMs and vendors. And our processors feature enhanced cryptography to accelerate performance and help secure, some of the transactions and secure transactions that are happening today in the world. And so some of the foundational capabilities that Intel has across its products, for example, is Intel crypto acceleration. We all know that cryptography is becoming an increasingly important element for data transfer, ensuring that data is transferred securely from point A to point B. And so having cryptography and algorithms that help secure the data while at rest or while at flight is extremely critical. So we have that capability built in. We have capabilities like advanced encryption standard, new instructions or AES-NI, that helps us execute the data, especially security algorithms, at a pace, at a speed that is much faster without compromising on the performance of regular applications and instructions running on the platform. We have foundational capabilities like BIOS card and boot card. We have a converged security and management engine, again, built in as well. In fact, we leverage a capability called platform firmware resilience that we have built inside a system. And this is FPGA-based solution. So we have a FPGA-based solutions called based on a Max-10 FPGA, which we have integrated inside our platform designs and reference architecture that helps us ensure that the firmware that is on the server is secure. And every time there is a access to the firmware, then that access is a secure access. And that level of capability is enabled through the Max-10 FPGA that we have built inside the reference architecture. We have other foundation capabilities like platform trust technology. We have quick assist technology as well that helps us deliver a performance, especially for data in flight through the network ecosystem, through the network, ensuring that the performance is maintained at near-line speed while giving you that encryption and decryption that you want. So these are some of the foundational security capabilities that we have enabled in the platform today, and especially on our third generation Xeon scalable processor. But by no means this is complete, right? There are capabilities that we continue to see, continue to add, that the standards are continue to evolve from a security perspective that we constantly look at and bring into our platform, especially as the designs that we're looking into the future.
Great, Adesh. Thanks for sharing that multi-level, multi-layered security defenses that has been put in at the core or at the foundation.
Yeah.
You touched on the third generation Xeon scalable process, Adesh. Could you share the key benefits of the processor and the security capabilities it delivers to the application developers and end users?
Yeah, that's a great question, Clement. This is, I love to talk about the new product that we have introduced, an amazing product codenamed Ice Lake. And we call it the third generation Xeon scalable processor. And the product was announced in April this year with some amazing capabilities from a performance perspective, plus from a security perspective that have been built in. So we have developed a balanced architecture with built-in acceleration. Again, very important to understand, it's built-in acceleration and advanced security capabilities at the silicon level itself for the most demanding workload environments. And we haven't done this alone, right? It's with a partnership with some of the world's software leaders and solution providers. And so the third generation Xeon scalable processors are optimized for different workload types at different performance levels, all ensuring that there is an open architecture that our customers and our software developers can use, and they have been known to use and trust for decades. And so some of the capabilities that we have built in, and I alluded to some of them before, let me talk a little more into some of the, a little more depth into some of the capabilities. For example, the software guard extensions or SGX. And this is again a unique capability that it's not new to Intel. We have been having this for a few years, but on our mainstream dual socket platform, this is the first time that we have introduced it. And so it provides a fine grain of data protection via application isolation in memory, right? Independent of the operating system or the hardware configuration. This is extremely important because, when you are, let me take an example of a virtualized environment. When you're running a VM and you have your application running in a virtualized environment, you want to ensure that your virtual environment is secure. And you want to ensure that if for some reason you move your VM from one system to another system and you do what's called as a, let's say, live migration, then you don't want anything to be broken and you want to ensure that the migration is secure. And so with software guard extensions, you can build enclaves, memory enclaves for your application running in a virtualized environment and ensure that the data migration is smooth and it is completely secure. That's one example of how SGX really helps. We also have crypto acceleration. I talked about it before, and it is, again, it works in conjunction with our AES-NI, which is a built-in vector set of instructions that helps us ensure that the data is encrypted and decrypted, especially when you have got your application developers who want to make use of encryption and decryption capabilities. We have those instructions built inside the isolate processor architecture. So security hash algorithm extensions, for example, or unique RSA or DH encryption protocols that our developers want to use, we have those capabilities now, some of the instruction level capabilities built inside the processor, which means that when you call those instructions from a developer's perspective, your execution time is significantly reduced because you don't have to create your own code for developing those algorithms. We have them capabilities already built inside the processor. All you need to do is to make a processor call.
Great.
We have total memory encryption. Again, a capability that is very unique to the isolate processor family. And I talked about our platform firmware resilience in conjunction with our FPGA Max 10 that is built inside the reference architecture that helps ensure that your firmware, which by the way is extremely critical, that every time the server boots up, you want to ensure that it boots up in a known good firmware configuration.
Correct.
And for some reason, you have a malware or you have an attack on the firmware, the PFR or the platform firmware resilience capability on the system helps ensure not only to block that malware, but if for some reason it gets corrupted, it is able to automatically boot from a known good configuration.
Great.
So you have got fallback mechanisms that have been built inside the platform to make sure your platform comes up, in a secure environment.
Great. Wonderful, Adish. Thanks a lot for sharing so much about how Intel is actually taking, and have taken for years, security serious, and you have put on tons and tons of layers and new technologies, and we are very happy to hear all about the Ice Lake processor, your third generation Xeon scalable processor. Adish, thanks a lot. Thanks for being with us. It was a pleasure having you on board. Right. Have a great day. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and have a great event. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Adish. Thank you.
Right. Thanks to Adesh there. Before we go into actually Shastri, you have heard from HP and you've heard from Intel the amount of security measures that they're actually putting in place to pick up the malwares or implants and all of it. But again, these all are high-end servers, guys. I don't think so our routers, I don't think so our switches, our desktops and our laptops are having all of these features. Like these are enterprise server grade kind of defenses, right? So just to keep you synced on what we are hearing and what we have heard in the morning from what I had shown you as a live demo versus all these technologies that are coming in place from a server based boards, helping us to maintain our production enterprise stack safe as possible, right? So there are also methods to bypass these things, but that's very, very rare and very, very difficult. It needs a very high skill set and a complete access to the hardware modules to bypass these defenses that Intel and HP has put in place. So since we understood all of that, let's get into let's go and talk to Mr. Shastri from Microsoft to know more about, hey, how Microsoft sees security, how Microsoft sees zero trust, and how do they practice that, and how each of these layers come together in protecting us as customers and users of Microsoft technologies, and what is the significance of the Refirm acquisition, which is a firmware kind of management from a security perspective. So let's hear it from Shastri, guys. Here we go.
Good morning, Shastri. Thanks for joining, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks, Clement, for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Shastri, looking at the current pandemic situation we are in, I believe the hybrid work will continue. We're all going to be working from home for some time now. What is Microsoft's approach to hybrid work?
Sure. A good question to kind of start with this theme. So, if the pandemic was not there, perhaps we'd have done this in KL directly. But now, because the situation we are in, since the pandemic started last year, the Microsoft leadership, engineering teams, various other teams have been looking various ways, to improve the lives of both customers and our own internal employees. As Microsoft mission is basically to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. So we are truly working towards that, and Microsoft has been consistently helping customers to navigate through these tough times. In the early days of COVID, when it started last year, Microsoft, in fact, offered businesses as well as individual users free uses of Microsoft platform for several months, and those offers are still continuing now. So, and we have gone through the same challenges, right? So there are a lot of areas where probably we didn't completely transform. There are areas where we had a different approach. So I would like to highlight, the three key areas of our approach when it comes to hybrid work. The first one is, people. I'll not go through detail. There is a very good report published by Microsoft, which I'll leave with the audience for them to kind of read through. Very good report on the suggestions. First is, when it comes to hybrid, it's people. Hybrid, as you started with by saying, it's inevitable. So there is a requirement for everybody to create a culture, the organizations to create a culture, and also empower managers to lead this. Then again, also we need to build a listening system because we are stuck all day in calls, continuous presentations. So how do we really listen to employees' challenges? How do we listen to remote worker challenges? And how do they really voice their challenges, their opinions, right? So that's second, building a listening system. Third one is because we are continuously engaged, continuously in calls, continuously working, staying at home, how do we learn and grow? These three areas from a people perspective. I just want to give you a couple of examples from a Microsoft perspective. Please look at Microsoft today, the way we changed since the COVID started. We provided a flexible work policy. Now, if you look at US, where the situation is improving a bit, where our employees can select which location they can sit, what flexible times they want to work, and which site. For example, today, many of my colleagues who are actually Singapore employees work from Malaysia, Indonesia, India, their home countries, because they're stuck there. But still, Microsoft allows them to work from there because eventually it's like, end of the day, it's remote work, right? So they can work from anywhere. That flexibility and empowerment should be given to the managers. That's the overall idea. Second, also enable some form of, applications or tooling so that they can request for work site change, work location change in work hours. For example, for me, we were talking the other day, my two kids, my wife, all are in different rooms doing their own, classes and conducting classes. So it's pretty challenging to manage the entire day. So it's important, to allow employees to kind of change their flexible timings also. So that's the recommendation from Microsoft. From a learning perspective, which is super critical, leverage, platforms like Microsoft Teams for collaboration, Microsoft Viva for learning, employee management, LinkedIn Learning, and several other tools. Every organization has their own tools. Now, if you look at the way Microsoft adopts this learning model is every month at the fourth Friday of every month, which is basically the fourth Friday, second half of the day is completely allocated for learning for Microsoft employees. We are not supposed to set up any, calls at that point of time. And there are certain sessions, professional sessions where you want to learn, develop your career towards certain professional goals. So some specific areas that you can develop and learn. The second aspect is places. Now in Singapore, still we are not allowed to go to office. And when it was allowed to, certain people, restrictions were there. So how do you allow people back safely? So that's an important consideration when it comes to places. The second approach. So there, Microsoft uses something called the health check app, simple app, in fact, developed in Power Platform pretty quickly. So when we go to office, it allows us to give all the information about our vaccination status,
what kind of rooms we want to reserve. Do you want to sit in a cubicle or in a conference room? What kind of time slots you want to visit? Then based on that, it recommends, what are the prerequisites, what you need to be prepared before you go to the workspace, some checklists and all that are shared to us. That helps us to be prepared and not just directly go to the office and then figure out, right? Then also one thing we need to realize when it comes to places is meeting rooms, right? So earlier all meetings used to be in conference halls. Now it's all happening remotely and people now slowly getting used to that. So how do we place our cameras? How do we ensure that we are inclusive? Like, there are people joining from different geographies. How do we include live captions, transcriptions, raising hands, all of that, like chart, whiteboarding. So these are some considerations from a places perspective. The third one, processes, which are again important. So like I was saying earlier, when Microsoft has been trying to move all our applications to the cloud for quite a long time, but that gathered pace, for some specific applications, line of business applications, you have to log into VPN and use that. And these workloads have been completely moved to the cloud. We can access that from anywhere, any device. So also Microsoft's suggestions to businesses is to move key workloads to the cloud where possible. As you know, since the COVID started, many businesses got disrupted because nobody had any clue and never planned, how to have workers remotely join in and access their line of business applications. Because now things are changing, it's the right time to move critical workloads to the cloud, plan, the remote worker access for critical applications, and adopt that as a part of your business process. The final piece in the processes part is the most important one for everybody, which is zero trust security from cloud to edge. Anything that you use, anything that any employee tries to access a corporate resource, either it could be application, it could be network, it could be anything. You start with a zero trust security mindset, which is basically, trust but verify, right? So those are the key three areas that Microsoft focuses on in terms of approach to the people, places, and processes. And like I said, there's a very good learning from us, and we've published it in a guide accessible to all.
Thanks, Shastri. As you talk about zero trust security, right? Trust none, verify everything kind of an approach. Could you brief on how Microsoft itself adopted the zero trust security model? And what would be Microsoft's recommendation to customers?
Sure, definitely. So zero trust, if you look at it, started quite long ago, 2011, but it took quite some time to gain that prominence. And today it's mainstream. If you look at every organization, not just Microsoft, talking about zero trust. And for us, it took around 5 years to move into that path, right? It's not easy. So the idea of zero trust is, we move away from the perimeter-based, specific targeted networks and VPN-dependent approach of security, which earlier adopted, into a zero trust model, which, basically assumes that there is always a breach, some form of breach, so that you're prepared for that breach at any given point of time. When your employees are accessing through your devices, you assume that, okay, these are the breaches that could be possible, and how I protect my data, my applications, my network, right? So you're prepared for that. And how do I verify each of these areas? If you look at Microsoft today, all VPN is gone. All our applications are accessed directly via, the browser or, directly through our apps. And there are different mechanisms like Microsoft, the multi-factor authentication or conditional access, depending on which location you are. When did you log in from what location? And, if I logged in just now from Singapore, within a few minutes, I log in from somewhere else, it's assumed as a breach. So there are a few more verification steps you have to go through. So similarly, for every device that we use, whether my personal device, today I'm using my personal device, but when I log in with Microsoft ID, I have to go through certain requirements where it will verify my Wi-Fi security, it will verify my network security, my identity, then only it will allow me to the network. So that's the overall theme of the zero trust, and we are adopting that, and Microsoft suggests all organizations to kind of consider zero trust. That's the future. And if you look at NIST also published zero trust security panel, guidance around that.
And there is a huge, guidance from Microsoft on Zero Trust at the Zero Trust Guidance Center. I would highly kind of recommend you to go through them.
Thanks, Shastri. What is Microsoft's security vision for the ever-changing attack landscape, right? Every second there are thousands of attacks all over the world in multiple layers, right? Including firmware, OS, application level, web level, mobile level. So what is Microsoft's security vision for this?
Sure, very good question. And the way we are changing now, I think it makes sense for me to kind of give you a little bit background on Microsoft security business before we dive into the vision. So traditionally, Microsoft is not looked at as a pure play security player. But if you look at Microsoft business today on security, it's around $10 billion, growing at 40% year on year. Huge business. Also our focus is around security, compliance, identity management, all of this. And if you look at today, we have more than 400,000 customers across 120 geographies, with 90% of the Fortune 100 customers using four or more of our security solutions. It could be endpoint security, it could be device protection, it could be identity like Azure Active Directory, it could be compliance or threat detection, right? So to name a few. So there's a wide coverage of our solutions across the Fortune 500 and other customer base, huge customer base. Also, the most important thing to understand here is that there's a very strong partner ecosystem as well, which honestly makes it easier for customers to adopt and leverage our security solutions. It's much easier. You name it any geography, even in the smallest geography, you'll have a Microsoft partner who can come and deploy the solutions for you and work with you in a consultative manner, right? So all our products by default have a security built in. So that's why maybe Microsoft never talks too much, but now we have formed a security vertical. Earlier, we used to have Azure security, M365 security, but now we formed a Microsoft security vertical where all the security solutions will come in at one point. And if you look at from a vision perspective, there are three broad areas. The first one is basically end-to-end protection across multi-cloud and multi-vendors. So if you look at any of the solutions that we have today from a security perspective, let's take Microsoft Endpoint. Microsoft Endpoint works across Windows, iOS, Android. So every platform, every security solution that we are building today, the goal is to basically build it for multi-vendor support, multi-cloud support, like AWS or GCP or any other clouds. The solution should be able to work across clouds. Similarly, the interoperability of our SIM platform, SIM and SOAR platform, which is called Microsoft Sentinel. Today, if you look at it, it's one of the fastest growing SIM and SOAR platform in the market, completely cloud-based. You can set it up within just less than 48 hours, you can set it up. And it has over 130 connectors connecting to different clouds, different platforms. Similarly, other products like Azure Security Center cuts across different platforms. That's the end-to-end protection across multi-cloud and multi-vendor. The second area of our vision is category excellence. If you look at our security solutions today, we are across 48 different areas, but 5 of those are actually in Gartner leader quadrants and 7 in Forrester Wave. So it's a huge achievement for Microsoft in those areas. And the idea is to, whatever areas we are today in security solutions, platforms, we want to be the best there. So that's the category excellence. The third one, which is again important, is new market opportunities. There are specific areas like firmware protection, hardware protection. How do you protect different breaches which are happening? How do you enable next-gen endpoint? How do you provide privacy management, security as a service? With some human touch, right? So these are some areas where we have been making significant investments. And just to give you some quick insights, we recently acquired CloudKnox for security insights and reporting, Reform Labs on firmware security analysis and threat management for connected devices. Risk IQ, again, to bolster security on specific areas of identity management. So there are a lot of acquisitions happening, and the idea is to close the gaps and provide better identity management, IoT, threat intelligence capabilities to our customers and their businesses.
Wonderful, Shastri. Thanks a lot for sharing so much in depth about how Microsoft sees security and how Microsoft is building the security layers across from on-premise, from endpoints, on-premise, and to the cloud. And now with the acquisition of Refirm, Risk IQ, and we're having a separate security pillar. Thanks a lot for sharing all of that, Shastri. And we are again very happy to have you on this panel discussion. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Stay safe.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Clement, for inviting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So with that, we have actually enjoyed and we have learned a lot from Puven, Adesh, Sastri on the respective multi-layered security approaches, right? And we understood that the hybrid work from home, work from office, cloud is going to stay for very long. So as we all move to cloud, as we all work from home, the cloud security or the attacks on cloud-based applications, cloud softwares as services, and cloud hosting places has also increased. So to speak to us about the cloud security threat actors and what kind of attacks are happening in the cloud, and how do we handle it, and what are our action points that we need to put in place in to protect our cloud, we have Priyanka, who's going to actually take us for the next 30 minutes odd on cloud security and threat actors. Who are the threat actors that are active? What are they doing? How they are doing it? And how we can protect ourselves, right? So over to Priyanka now here.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Work From Home 2021 conference. So nice to have you all on board with me today. And today, the topic of discussion for the next 30 minutes is going to be cloud security threat actors. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to be talking about cloud environment and also why threat actors love to target the cloud environment, and also how to keep ourselves as safe as possible from all kinds of targeting and attacks. So let's get going. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Priyanka Jayakumar. I am a cybersecurity consultant in Cybertronium. And my forte, as you can see over there, I'm a cyber threat hunter and a forensics investigator. And when I'm not doing that, I'm predominantly a penetration tester. I work on web, mobile, network, and I recently got into Wi-Fi area as well. And when I'm not doing that, I'm also blog on cybersecurity issues, right? I'm a cybersecurity blogger. And for this role, I've received 2 awards so far. One was last year, Top 13 ASEAN LinkedIn Security Influencers 2020. And the other one was just early this year, I think in January. I got awarded as the Cybersecurity Blogger of the Year 2021, the gold winner for the ASEAN region. Other than that, I'm also a trainer for Global A certifications. They're pretty much certification courses. We have CPT, which is a Certified Penetration Testing course. CSOC stands for Certified SOC Analyst. And CCTI stands for Certified Cyber Threat Intelligence Analyst. So I'm a trainer for all those certification courses. And other than that, I'm also a speaker in cybersecurity conferences, and I often give talks across the ASEAN region as well. And below there, those are my credentials as to where I stand in terms of certifications. Now let's get going. Why cloud environments are ideal targets? Let's talk about the why first, right? Because today our focus is the cloud environments, and we know that a lot of threat actors have shifted their attention to the cloud environment. So let's understand why. Reasons are very simple, guys. Now, more and more organizations are moving to cloud environments because cloud environments are the new it thing, and a lot of people are moving towards this solution not knowing of the consequences. So naturally, when a lot of people move to a particular solution, that is where threat actors will create havoc, right? And naturally so, because cloud environments contains large, valuable, and sensitive data, especially because there's this myth, right, that cloud is very secure compared to at least traditional alternatives. So naturally, if this is your conception, which is a misconception. If this is your understanding, naturally organizations will put up all kinds of sensitive data online in the cloud. But this is a wrong idea, understanding that cloud is secure. Why do I say so? Look at the third point. It says best practices surrounding cloud security and incident response is still being experimented, which means it's still vague, it's still ambiguous. We don't have a definitive, a solid, a concrete best practice guide just yet. We are still experimenting it. We're trying to improve it. We're trying to make it better. But do we have the final solid solution? No, far from that actually. I wouldn't say that, right? Next, let's understand who is targeting cloud systems today. Number one, we have cyber criminals. Cyber criminals are pretty much criminals who create havoc in the surface web, and whatever resultant data that they get from the surface web, they take it to the dark web. They are heavily associated to the dark web. Now, we will talk about that more in the upcoming slides. But number two, let's talk about financially motivated criminals. This is the second type of group of people who love to target the cloud systems. Now, financially motivated criminals, they are a subtype of cyber criminals, but the end game, their motive, their main motive in their mind is money. Money is in their mind. They don't really care for anything else. And because they only go after financial reasons, they are rarely ever associated with any particular threat actor group or an organization. They are just a bunch of opportunists, right? They will try to attack as many cloud systems as possible to try and gain access and then try to, manipulate things from there on. But they are just a bunch of opportunists. They'll try to hit as much as possible. If they gain access, then, well, it's their big payday. And because they're just trying to cast a wider net, right? It's nothing specific, nothing really targeted per se of an organization. They normally automate their attacks just so that to get that broader, that wider target audience, right? Number three, we have nation state actors. Now, this bunch of people, they are pretty much government-sponsored or government-backed threat actors, meaning every government has their own cyber warfare team or cyber hacking team. Right? The reason they are trying to create, their main motive, the main reason they are groups like this and backed by governments especially is because they're trying to spy on other governments and they're trying to protect themselves or defend themselves or even go on the offensive route with other countries on the cyber front. So when you talk about nation state actors, why do they target cloud systems? As I said, it's mainly to spy. Is for cyber espionage purposes, right? They try to hit other countries' cloud systems, and if they can get a rival country's data, then they can use it to their own advantage at a later point of time, right? Moving on. We spoke about cyber criminals being heavily associated with the dark web, right? Because pretty much whatever they do on the surface web, eventually they end up in the dark web. And who carries them down to the dark web? Often than not, it's the cyber criminals. So, what is the reputation of cloud environment in the dark web? Let's look at a few things, right? There's a thriving market for cloud-targeted services and accounts on underground forums and markets, which means business is booming in the dark web, right? Cloud environment has a really good reputation in the dark web, right? Especially in underground forums and markets. Let's look at why. If you go into the dark web today, you will find cloud service accounts at reduced prices. They are being sold at a very cheap rate, right? So what happens is that a threat actor comes into contact with a cloud environment. He gets, he compromises that environment. He gets cloud service accounts, and he starts selling these accounts at reduced prices. He starts selling it to anybody on the dark web who's interested, right? You have case number one there. In a Russian language forum, it was found that it's somebody in there, one of the threat actors or one of the hackers in there, they were offering an unlimited monthly service for a large public cloud service that was cheaper, way cheaper than the public sale price. And in another case, another different group, they were found selling access keys to another large public cloud service for as little as $15 each, which is dirt cheap. in other words, right? Because they pay such little amount of money, but once they get into those compromised cloud service accounts, the data they can find in there and what they can do with the data, the impact is huge, right? It cannot be explained. And it's not something that is static. It's very dynamic. Attacks can become dynamic, hackers can become creative, and definitely they're going to bring in more money. They're going to generate a lot of revenue for themselves compared to this $15 that they initially put in place, right? Why? Threat actors use cloud infrastructure for their malicious activities. We will talk about this particular point over and over in multiple places as we continue with the session. They mainly use, once you compromise a cloud infrastructure, threat actors will try to take advantage as max as possible. They'll try to max it out, their state. How do you maximize the fact that you're already inside a cloud environment? And they'll turn it into their malicious activity campaign, or they'll start to perform their own campaigns in there. Moving on. The second thing you can find in the dark web, assistance in penetrating specific cloud-hosted accounts. Now, let's say I'm a hacker, and I come into contact with a cloud-hosted account, which I don't know how to breach or I don't know how to penetrate. Then what I can do is I can go into the dark web to my community, and it's like a discussion forum in there where I can put up my query and ask questions, ask for help, ask for feedback from other people, especially the experienced hackers, right? You can definitely find help. So you'll be finding help in assisting you in penetrating this kind of accounts. Case number one, it was found in the dark web that there was a platform that connected both English and Russian speaking hackers. And in this platform, somebody posted a link to bypass a utility to access personal accounts on a large public cloud platform. Number one, that's case number one. Case number two, a threat actor or a hacker was found offering steps for exploiting a public cloud services ID, and they included a script that the hacker was selling on the forum, which means it's a step-by-step documentation on how to exploit this particular public cloud service ID, which is free. And then they include a script which you need to pay for, which is also probably cheap. So you pay the little amount of price, you get both of it going. And just like that, you have compromised a cloud hosted account. Case number three, threat actors were found selling cloud computing resources. Moving on. Free and paid tutorials is a hit in the dark web. So example, right? This is a scenario. I am a rookie threat actor. Okay, I'm a rookie hacker. And I want to explore cloud environment. I want to learn how to breach cloud environment. But obviously I need to start somewhere, right? I don't know what to do. For scenarios like this, threat actors offer free and paid tutorials. When I speak about tutorials, this can either be videos made by the more experienced threat actors, where they walk you through step by step. Every single process, they record it for you and to show you how to use it, right? It's either through videos, or another version of tutorials can also be very elaborate documentation, right? Detailed steps with screenshots, which is going to cause no confusion on the rookie side, right? Anybody who buys it, whether it's free or paid, if you're going to buy it, you buy or you get it for free, you will learn how to bypass or how to get into a cloud environment successfully. When you talk about tutorials, they're mostly revolving around how to use cloud computing credits or stolen credit cards to open accounts on popular cloud services and then use them for malicious purposes. Naturally, because these guys are bad people with bad intentions, right? Moving on. Now, we know that we know why threat actors love to target the cloud environment. We saw the reasons why. We saw who likes to target the cloud environment. And we also saw what is the reputation of the cloud environment or the cloud assets in the dark web, which is a big hit. Now, if it is such a big hit, where do threat actors start in the first place? What is the infection vector of choice? Because cloud environment is a huge environment and there's a lot of components working together, right? But where do they start? Obviously, threat actors can't hit at one place. in multiple places at the same time. They must favor one of these components. What is that component? That component is the cloud application. Now, let's look at it in depth. Initial compromise of a vulnerable cloud-hosted application. This vulnerable cloud-hosted applications are the cause of 45% of total cloud incidents. It is almost half of all cloud incidents. So this alone is the biggest or leading reason for cloud incidents, which is huge. And when you talk about vulnerabilities, especially in cloud applications, we have to talk about remote vulnerabilities, right? But the problem with remote vulnerabilities is that they are a challenge in itself. Why? Why is it a challenge? It's because regarding remote vulnerabilities, there's a lack of public cataloging, which means remote vulnerabilities, they are not publicly disclosed, they are not recorded, and then a lot of documentation. And so you don't find them in public domains. But because of this lack of cataloging, lack of documentation, we think that cloud is secure because it does not have that many vulnerabilities compared to traditional alternatives. When in fact, we are just not disclosing it. Just remote vulnerabilities are not being disclosed or recorded properly. Poor public cataloging is the leading reason for this. So this is a challenge. And this is also the reason for that myth, for that misconception that cloud is secure, one of the leading reasons, right? Moving on, most organizations contain vulnerable applications in the environment, but they remain undetected. Question would be why, right? Two reasons. It can be due to poor or lack of security maturity in the organization, maybe lack of awareness, right? And the second reason, it could be due to shadow IT. Shadow IT is where, let's say, an employee, they go against that organization's IT department, goes against or goes outside of the approved channels or tools that can be used within the organization. And maybe this employee chooses to use a particular cloud application, but they don't know it's vulnerable. And when this employee uses this vulnerable cloud application, the entire organization, the entire environment is at risk. That is shadow IT. Second reason is cross-cloud compromise. This is where threat actors infect one cloud environment, and from there, they try to move laterally to other cloud environments or other clouds and in additional environments by manipulating the trusted connection. So they infect one cloud environment. From there, they try to move to other cloud environments, right? That is cross-cloud compromise. This in particularly puts large public clouds at risk. Why? Because in large public clouds, there's a high volume of communication. A lot of communication goes up and down. And it'll be very difficult for you to differentiate which communication is malicious and which communication is legitimate. So detection becomes a problem there. Threat actors are only detected when larger than normal amounts of data were observed being transferred between clouds. This is a rookie mistake for threat actors. When they get greedy and they want to transfer larger amounts of data in a shorter period of time, that's when they give away and they get detected by defenses. But otherwise, it's very easy for them to stay on the down low. Next would be misconfigured cloud environments, right? This is the second or even the third biggest reason of all breaches, right? Misconfigured cloud environments. By you not configuring your cloud environment, you can result in over 1 billion records lost or stolen. In fact, this happened in 2019 because cloud environments were not properly configured. Last would be some interesting technique called the swimming upstream technique. Right. In this technique, in this unique technique, what happens is that a threat actor will target the host that is hosting multiple cloud instances, maybe for different organizations, right? They will target this underlying host. And since this host is hosting multiple cloud instances for many different organizations, there's definitely going to be a management system in place for the host to move in between client environments. Now, the threat actor targets the host, underlying host, compromises the management system inside the host. And then once they're inside the management system, they can easily move between different client environment, different cloud instances. And this makes matters worse because it can malicious activity can be easily masked as legitimate administration. It will be very difficult for you to tell, hey, whether this is a normal activity or it's a malicious activity going on. Why? Because you're already in the management system itself, right? Moving on. What happens upon successful cloud environment compromise? So now, once a threat actor is inside the cloud environment, what do? A few things starting with ransomware. Ransomware is very common and it's 3 times more likely to be deployed compared to any other malware type. It's like the threat actor's favorite already, ransomware, especially today in the during the COVID-19 pandemic. We see a lot of ransomware attacks, and cloud environment is not an exception to ransomware attacks, right? It's more disruptive and it causes greater data loss, not to mention monetary loss as well. In a sample ransomware incident, what happened in this particular ransomware incident was that it happened due to a gap in cloud administration responsibilities. Now, when you talk about cloud environment, you have to understand it's not just the organization's responsibility. It's not just the cloud hosting provider's responsibility. It's a joint responsibility. Both have roles to play. But when you don't define roles, you don't make the roles clear, that's when you have a gap formed in the middle. Due to that gap, a ransomware incident happened in an organization and it went undetected for a long period of time, which naturally costed in a great amount of money, right? Next would be they would try to host the malware or malicious sites. Once you get into a cloud environment, this is the second best thing they can try to do. And what type of malware would they try to host? They will try to host a malware that can subsequently spread onto other environments. And when I say subsequently spread, one thing comes to mind, right? Worms, because they can propagate by themselves. They can help themselves. Now, how do they mask this kind of malware activity? They avoid network blocks by making this malware activity appear as call-outs to legitimate infrastructure. At the back, something is happening. The malware is doing a few things. But in the front, it's going to appear as if it's just normal callouts to legitimate infrastructure. And to make things worse for us, but better for the threat actors, cloud hosting can provide a layer of abstraction. It's ambiguous, right? Which makes it difficult for us to track a malicious campaign by the threat actor. And it leads to both direct and reputational harm for the organization. Direct harm means, data loss, monetary loss. Reputational harm is when the organization can be accused of allowing such malwares spread in the environment, right? They can be accused wrongly like that. Number 3 would be using compromised access as operational infrastructure. We touched about this earlier a little bit, right? So once you're in the cloud environment, obviously, threat actors will try to max out as much as possible their stay there, right? They've already compromised that environment. And it's a brand new environment. They will try to max it out as much as possible, right? How do they max it out? Let's say a company's cloud has a malware. They've already compromised a particular company's cloud environment. They put a malware in there. Now, let's say another company accesses a resource from this company's environment. Now it's 2 times the harm and risk, which is good news for the hacker because he gets double fold his prize money or his end game. But for us, the good guys, we lose out, right? Moving on, obviously data theft. The moment anything is compromised, the first thing that is put at risk is data, right? Data theft. It can be either exploited or sold in underground marketplaces. When I say exploited, there are some threat actors who go after particular organizations, targeted or not targeted, they go after organizations, and the data that they get at the end of the day, they will take it for themselves, for them to go and exploit by themselves. Whatever they do, it's only for them. But the more lazy or the more common thing, the common consequence of data theft is that it's going to be sold in underground marketplaces, right? You don't have to put in much effort. You just have to go and sell it to the underground marketplace, and it'll generate income for you as a hacker, right? So some of the data that they can get from the cloud environment is PII, your personally identifiable information. You have credit card numbers, you have client-related emails, and etc. Right? Among a lot of things, these are the few highlighted ones. Next would be crypto mining. Crypto mining is becoming a new hit with threat actors, right? So once they get into a cloud environment, they put crypto miners in place. Why? To quickly monetize illicit access, and they take advantage of cloud environment for malicious campaign. And it impacts on-prem cloud environments and external public clouds. Now, when you talk about on-prem cloud environment, this can result in increased electricity cost. It can degrade hardware faster, and it can affect performance level in organizations. And certain sectors like financial sectors, they can't afford to lose their performance level. It's critical for them to keep the operations going, right? When you talk about external or public clouds, in this particular scenario, this is where you'll observe an increased charges due to higher data usage and slower response times due to slower processing power. So these are the two different effects you will see, right, due to crypto mining in different environments. Example, crypto mining incident. A cloud server was infected the crypto miner that subsequently attempted to spread laterally to connected machines, which brings me to my last point, lateral spread. Naturally, right? You get into a cloud environment, you infect, initial infection. From there, how do you move? Horizontally, vertically, but you need to move. Otherwise, you will not cover a lot of base. So from initial infection to other parts of the cloud environment or onto endpoint boxes to users who access cloud resources. But the problem here is the lateral spread does not just stop at the cloud environment level. It goes one step down to internal network space, which means the company's internal network area as well, which is bad news for us, but good news for the hackers because they can play even more. Their playing space becomes wider, right? Example, lateral movements. One of the lateral movements it was seen being done through SSH brute forcing, where it affected external local machines accessing the cloud. In another incident, lateral movement happened with Exim worm. I think we all know about this by now, right? The world famous Exim worm. It's actually Linux-based worm that took advantage of Exim servers, or it spread through Exim servers by exploiting a remote vulnerability, a particular remote vulnerability. And its main goal, its end goal, is to drop a cryptojacking malware. So these are all the possible things threat actors can do and have done so far once they have compromised a cloud environment. Next. So we all know that threat actors' focus has slowly been shifting to the cloud environment. We know that's a fact, right? And so we are also, the good guys are also trying to increase or better improve our defenses as well. So this is now a problem to threat actors. So they have to up their game. And how have they upped their game? They have done it by making their malwares more creative, more robust, more adaptive to the cloud environments, right? The first type of malware is a malware that uses cloud environment to scale in terms of operations or to scale in terms of attacks. Either way will work, right? This is where malware operators will try to ramp up operations and potentially gain significant profits with just a single compromise, which means they will target and hit one place where they can squeeze the maximum out of it, right? One compromise is enough for them to get more than enough, right? Example is daemon bot. DemonBot is a Linux-based bot that was found back in October 2018. And all DemonBot does is it targets cloud servers running Hadoop. Because in Hadoop, there's a vulnerability that exists in Hadoop's resource management tool, which DemonBot exploited. Right? In a particular incident that happened a few years back, an organization found an instance of DemonBot in their cloud environment. How? They observed that the billing and the resource usage had increased. So this gave a way for them to go investigate why. Why is the resource usage and the billing increased suddenly? So when they did their digging, they ended up finding a DemonBot instance in their cloud environment. And good for them, they found it in the right time because upon inspection of this DemonBot instance, they found that the primary function of that particular instance was to create denial of service attack, a DOS attack. So this particular organization were lucky enough when they found that particular instance of DemonBot in their cloud environment. Right? Next would be malware that adapts to cloud environments. Right? What do I mean by that? Right? There's a significant increase in the number of cyber attacks targeting Linux servers. Why? Why Linux servers? The reason is nearly 90% of all cloud servers is Linux OS servers. So naturally, threat actors are going to go after Linux servers because they are abundantly found in the cloud space. For example, Chinese affiliated Pacha group. This is a threat actor group. They are affiliated with the Chinese government. This group is responsible for the birth of Linux greedy ant malware. They are the ones who wrote Linux greedy ant malware. Now, this malware has many variations. So many different variations. Why? Even though it has so many different variations, the target is still Linux OS. Why? Because as I said, Linux OS accounts for nearly 90% of all cloud servers. And even though I said there's so many different variants, right? So why are there so many different variants? It's because every time Pacha group releases a particular new variant, a new undetected variant in the cloud to go and create havoc up there. And the moment it's detected, the Pacha group, they create a new variant of the same Linux greedy ant malware. And what they do, they retain most of the source code, right? If you pay attention to the source code, they retain the same code. They just change the look and feel here and there, but they still go through with the same malware. Just different variants and targeting the same target, which is Linux OS. They are persistent in that way. Second example would be the QNAP Crypt ransomware. Now, this ransomware specifically targets Linux-based file storage system, or in other words, NAS servers or NAS servers, right? For reasons like this, Linux-focused malware is likely to increase in the future, especially since it's a known fact that nearly 90% of all cloud servers are Linux OS, right? So it's natural to expect that increase in attacks for Linux OSs. Third type of malware are the malware that uses cloud environments for operational infrastructure. We spoke about this earlier already. Once a threat actor has gotten into a cloud environment, they will try to max out whatever they can do using that compromised cloud environment, they will do. And in terms of malware, they will go for malware. They will create malware that can help them use the infrastructure for their campaigns. Who uses this kind of malware? Normally organized crime and nation state attacks. For these kind of purposes, this kind of malware will be very useful. Now, example, we have RockRat over there. RockRat is a remote access tool, a RAT, right? And this tool is heavily associated with that particular threat actor, ITG10, aka PD37 or StarCraft. Now, this malware, this RAT, right, remote access tool, they heavily target South Korea victims, right? They specifically target South Korea victims or targets, right? And overall, this type of malware presents a big detection problem because, like I told you, once a malware is in the cloud environment and it's doing a whole bunch of things, right? It's very easy to mask malicious activity or the malware activity that it's trying to do. You can make it appear as if legitimate call outs, or you can make it look as if it's a legitimate administration activity that's going on. So it's very difficult for you to tell whether this is a malicious activity that's going on or it's a legitimate activity. You will not even doubt that it's something funny going on unless the threat actors gives themselves away, right? Like maybe they're transmitting huge number of data across clouds. Yes, then they will give themselves away. Otherwise, no. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about cloud security strategy. We saw about all the problems and we saw also how threat actors are getting better and better every day, which only means we need to secure ourselves as best as possible. Now, before you get into a cloud environment, you're preparing for a safe cloud environment, what are the things you should keep in mind? Number one, form a plan. Think through and come up with a well-thought plan. Build security controls that can give you more control, more visibility of what's going on in the cloud environment. And consider criticality and sensitivity of operations. Ask yourself, as an organization, do you need this particular component in the cloud? Is there any other better way to go about it? What are the security aspects in place in the cloud? Will I have control over these few activities? Ask yourself all these kind of questions and then make decisions from there. Next, if you can find a comprehensive security services that's going to give you visibility, can give you more control over cloud environments, go for it. Second, proactive simulation. Instead of being reactive and reacting to an attack after it has happened and then you reacting to it, simulate certain kind of scenarios, expected and unexpected security events. Simulate those events. Predicted and unpredicted events. Simulate those events and teach yourself how would you react to those events. Are your policies in place? Do you have correct skill set to deal with this kind of attacks? Ask yourself these kind of questions. And if you have internal playbooks, this is a good time for you to exercise your internal playbooks and also review your standard operating procedures. If you see there's a gap and they can be better improved, then do that. Also take advantage of tactical information such as IOCs, indicators of compromise, so that they can support threat intelligence driven response. Because today, to be honest, that is where the world is moving to, right? TI, threat intelligence driven response. So next would be to prevent policy dead spots. When you talk about policy dead spots, you mainly talk about sharing of responsibility. I told you the cloud environment, when you talk about cloud environment, it's not just one person's problem. It's not just the organization or it's not just the cloud hosting provider. You have both involved in this, especially when you talk about protection of cloud environment. Both have equal parts, right? Both organization and cloud hosting providers, they have their own roles, which you need to make crystal clear, no confusion, no hesitation, no whatsoever. You need to be sure what you need to do, right? You need to know who does what and does it when, right? These kind of questions needs to be answers so that you can prevent incidents resulting from policy gaps. Just like the ransomware incident that we discussed earlier, you can prevent that if only you didn't have dead spots in your policies. It promotes for more efficient detection and incident response, right? Moving onward, apply best practices, at least as best as possible that you can find today. So today, whatever best practices are there, make sure you adhere to those kind of practices, right? When you talk about best practices, multi-factor authentication is a best practice any day. Reason being, let's say your cloud application's credentials, let's say your credentials are stolen or breached, right? In another attack, in a separate attack somewhere. But those stolen credentials, those breached credentials, you use those same credentials for a particular cloud application, which means threat actors technically have your credentials. But if you have multi-factor authentication in place, even if a threat actor is trying to use your credentials to log into, say, a particular cloud application, because you have multi-factor authentication in place, they can't get a hold of the PIN or the access code or the email that's going to come your way, right? So technically your multi-factor authentication is going to give you an extra added layer of protection when it comes to unauthorized access. Next, you have privileged account management, or PAM. Don't really need to say about this much, because I think we all know the significance of privileged account management, especially in the cloud environment, right? And also consider using zero trust model. Next, monitor and log. Make sure you have done sufficient monitoring and logging. Why? Why is it so important? Because enough monitoring and logging, sufficient monitoring and logging, can give away cloud sprawling, third-party access, and unexpected outages. It can even help you with detecting malware and the first sign of an attack. And best part of it all, if you have enough monitoring, if you're monitoring your cloud environment and you are logging all kinds of security events happening in there, then that can also help you with forensic investigation of malicious activity. Let's say your cloud environment at a later date is been compromised. Because you have monitoring and logging in place, that is going to help the forensic investigators to come and understand what has happened, right? Next would be threat intelligence. Like I said, threat intelligence is a booming sector in cybersecurity. It's blooming very beautifully. And threat intelligence is going to help you in what sense? Threat actors are evolving in TTPs with new capabilities, right? Every day, threat actors try to come up with new technique, tactics, and procedures, and with new capabilities. You cannot be manually sitting and watching every single threat actors and keeping up with their TTPs, right? It's almost impossible if you're going to do it alone. But threat intelligence can help you keep up with this piece of essential information. Why? Because it monitors changes in targeting. Or it can also capture the way threat actors have changed the way they are targeting victims or assets. And implementing threat intelligence can help implement effective defenses, especially with the help of IOCs, indicators of compromise, right? Moving on. Now let's talk a little bit about cloud security strategy in case you have an incident that has happened in your cloud environment. How do you respond to this kind of incidents, right? Number one, don't re-image, redeploy, right? So let's say you have a compromised cloud environment, right? Your cloud environment is compromised. Now, if you straight away go and terminate that instance, valuable forensics artifacts can be lost. So instead of straight away doing that, isolate affected systems and make sure you know which images are clean images. So isolate affected systems and ensure that clean images are not contaminated and are actually clean images, right? After that, build a workstation for forensic investigators in your cloud environment. Give them a space to work. And once they have a workstation of their own, let them create an image from compromised servers so that they can collect volatile memory data for them to go and perform their forensic investigation. Now, other than that, root cause forensic analysis can also help in the sense that it can prevent IT admins from redeploying a tainted or a corrupted or a contaminated base image. In essence, don't re-image, redeploy. Number two, remember bandwidth cost. Now, why is this suddenly important? Because downloading a large server image after a security incident, after a cloud incident, can be really pricey. But you can tackle this head on if you have relevant policies or requirement in place. If your policies are intact, they're correct, they can help you so that you don't feel that pinch that you with the cost, right? It can help you reduce the cost. Number three, automate incident response. Now, why do we need to automate incident response? Implementing security automation has an upper hand. It gives you better detection and response capabilities, which will lead to accelerated recovery during ransomware or destructive cyber attacks. So the moment you automate things becomes faster. You don't have to wait for human intervention, or at least you're not depending on human intervention that much, right? Things are pretty much automated and the tools know what to do. Lastly, right investigative tools. Today, common incident response and forensic tools, they're only effective for local environment or an on-premise hosted service. They're not really catered to cloud environments, right? But if you have the right toolkit in place, they can really help you with effective cloud investigations. Now, other than that, make sure you have your cloud assets as part of your overall incident response plans. A lot of organizations fail to do it, right? They don't consider them. But make sure your cloud assets are also part of your incident response plan. And lastly, make sure you test cloud security incident response at the tactical level with the help of indicators of compromise or IOCs. Now, that's all from me, guys. That's a wrap. So I hope the last 30 minutes was a good session with me. Hopefully it was productive and useful for you guys. If you have any questions, please drop it on the chat space. And if you'd like to keep in touch with me, you can easily find me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn handle is Priyanka Jaykumar. It's the same, my complete name. And yeah, if nothing else, thank you guys. Thank you for joining with me for the last 30 minutes and have a good day.
All right, thanks to Priyanka there. Coming back to me, guys. Coming back to me. Yeah. Let's share, unshare, put my video back. Oh, guys, welcome back. So from morning, we have started with the firmware vulnerabilities and I've gone into panel discussions and then we understood about cloud security. Now I'm going to hand over to Noel to take it on from here to talk about Azure, Azure security in the cloud and with few interesting demos. Noel, to you, buddy.
Thank you, Clement. Thank you. I know all of us been sitting through this for the last couple hours, so I thought to give everyone a bit of a break and also to grab some food and a bio break. All right, let's take a 10 minutes break. All right, so it's 12:32 now on my clock. So if we can all come back here promptly at 12:42, 43 now. All right, we can resume there straight into more exciting content around multi-layered security from on-premise all the way to the cloud. All right, so we're going to go into a deep dive security demo extravaganza if you want. All right, see you back in about 10 minutes. All right, thank you. Bye. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming back. I hope that short bio break was a good one. All right, so we have quite a lot in store, and because looks like we are running late as some of our previous events have indicated, we need to sort of rehash our agenda a little bit, right, so that we can actually get things back on track. All right, so the original plan was during the break, we were going to do a bit of a trailer for the BIS IT uh, track for next month, but we're going to postpone that to the end. All right, so that said, we're going to proceed on to look at some exciting demos from two of our best teams, right, Chua and Kenny. All right, so I'm going to pass you over to Chua so that he can get started on his demo. And then after that, he would then pass it on to Kenny, and then Kenny will then send it back to us. Thank you. Thanks, Chua.
Okay, let me share the screen now. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can
Yes,
see.
Chua.
Sure.
Yes, we
Yep.
can. Yep.
Can see.
Yes, sure.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So this is a little bit about the info about myself. For those who don't know me, I'm Chua. Okay, I work as a pre-sales consultant in eGate messaging and deep in this line, in IT line for more than 18 years. Okay, and the field I actually dive in is like the Azure Stack ACI, Microsoft Exchange, and also some security field like Microsoft Defender for endpoint, Defender for 365. Okay, so let's look at today's agenda. So this is the topic I will cover today. Defender for endpoint. We will go through a quick tour, then come to the how we can handle with the backdoor attack, then how the live response in the Defender endpoint can help you, and then we will come. The last is about the ransomware attack simulation. Okay, let's start now. Let me voice out.
We can't hear the voice, Chua.
Oh, you cannot hear the voice?
Yeah, it has to be shared.
Okay, let me try again.
Yeah.
Can you hear the voice now?
Yeah, two.
Welcome to the dashboard of
Yes,
Microsoft.
Yes. You can hear now.
Yes, we can hear.
Welcome to the dashboard of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. From here, we can get to know the summary of your health status in your organization. Example, the active alert, automated investigation and its statistic, devices at risk, user at risk, service health, and so on. Next is about the incident case. So once the Defender engine detects the suspicious activity, it will log an incident case into the portal, and here's the place. IT admin can, based on this incident, to further investigate. Next again is about the device inventory. From here, you will list down all the onboarded device, not limited to the Windows, but Linux, Mac, mobile phone as well. If further click in, you will see the security summary of the device. Okay, and at the left-hand side, you can see some information of the device, such as the OS, domain, IP. Let's look at the other option, alert. This is about the security alerts found on the devices, and it will list down all the security related finding into the portal, and it is sorted by the time. Second is a timeline, It's all about the activities happen in the PC, sorted by time according to the GMT0, which is the Greenwich time, not the Malaysia time. So you will have to plus 8 hours to convert it to the Malaysia time so that you won't get confused with the times listed. Okay, the next is about the security recommendation. It's about the security pen test toward the PC. So example, 0-day vulnerability patches. And because it is critical, it will list with the red color. Another example is like enable hide option for disable updates. Also, it will advise about the best practice to configure the Microsoft Defender. Okay, maybe you will ask, is it only limited to the Microsoft related product? Not really. Let's look at this one. Yep, block the Adobe Reader from creating child process. So this one is not a Microsoft product, but it also give you the advice. So the next is about the software inventory. It will list out all the installed apps in the PC. And it's sorted by the winner score, as what you can see. So again, next is about the discover vulnerabilities. It lists out all the vulnerabilities in the PC based on the code name. And if you click in, it will give you the advice on how to remediate the issue. The last one is about the missing KB, which will tell you that which pages should be applied for the PC. Other than that, Microsoft Defender for endpoints come with the function like isolate device, which is used to separate the device from the network, but it remains only the activities between the device and the Defender endpoints control center. So the next thing is about the restrict app execution. Once you enable this, it will allow only the Microsoft Sign application from running. Okay, you can also remotely execute the antivirus scan to the PC through this function. So next, what we have is collect investigation package, initiate the live response session, initiate automated investigation, and all this we will explain later. The last about a consult from the threat expert for Microsoft. So the next is about the alerts queue. This is the function like I mentioned just now, but this one a bit different, which is about the security alerts to your organization, but not limited to the single device. Another one is the automated investigation. This is the Defender endpoint engine will automatically investigate a suspicious activity, and you will try to remediate it if it can. Like example here, remediated, and also have a partially remediated cases. Okay, the next is about advanced hunting. If you are the query expert, you can use these features to query the information you want, such as the device info, network info from the event viewer of the PC. Okay, the next is about the reporting. Here we have the threat protection report, and this is the sample of the report. So another example, we have the, you see, okay, we take this one, vulnerable devices report. Here is the example. Last but not least is about the settings. Here you can enable, disable certain functions of Defender for endpoint. Example, automated investigation, live response, and also provide a step for the onboarding and offboarding. And here it lists down the supported OS, like Windows, Linux, Mac OS, Android, and you also provide a step for the installation. Okay, thanks for joining the tour, and we will proceed with the further demo. Stay tuned. Okay, the scenario is like this. Assume that got one user open the Microsoft Word file and he key in the password. Okay, he enabled the editing, and because due to he want to use the macro, he enabled the macro content. Okay, once he enabled, he found that got something executed. And after that, the user reported that got a file, a very suspicious exe file created in the desktop. And meanwhile, got a scheduled task created as well. Meanwhile, the IT administrator being notified by email about the incident. Well, let's switch to the Defender for Endpoint console. From here, we can see that we have 15 active alerts and also have some cases for the automated investigation statistic. We can see that got one device at risk, got one user at risk. Okay, let's switch to the incident view for this Defender console. From here, we can see that got one incident reported. And if we click in, here we can see that got 15 active alerts actually sorted by the time. And if, let's say, we click one of the alerts, so it will show in the hierarchical view towards that specific alert. An example here, one of the activity is about a greenword.exe, and it will show that what file has been executed and what will happen after executed the file. It shows that the suspicious PowerShell command line actually running. And if you click in, you will see that the details toward the PowerShell. Okay, maybe you will feel that it's very complex to you and you want to have something like simple to see and simple to understand. So this graph view is actually the very good to you. Example here, I click on one of the component .docm, and once I click in, it will show that something related to this docm. An example, this file. This docm file, it will tell you that the details about it, the hash, the file detection, and even show this observed by worldwide and then observed in your organization. Okay, so another thing I want to show you is about this evidence and response. So this is a play to show that anything related to this incident. Example, the file, what is actually happened, and what action taken. Example, the file is being quarantined and remediated. And you will show the file name, the path of the file is at the desktop. Okay, we want to see that whether it's real or not. Okay, we go to the desktop of the PC and we see that, yeah, the .exe, the backdoor file is no longer there because it's being quarantined, so it's right. Okay, let's switch back to the console. So another thing is about the investigation. So this part is about the action taken, which is actually still running, or maybe it's not yet completed. So here is what you can see. We have one PowerShell drop, a suspicious file, and the status show partially remediated. And if we click in, it shows the investigation graph. So here we can see they got 3 entities under the evidence, and the result is partially remediated. So other than the graph, we have the alerts, device, evidence, the entities. Okay, let's say we click in the alerts, it will show related alerts towards the investigation and the devices of the investigation target, the evidence. Okay, so let's click back this investigation graph. Okay, it shows that it's partially remediated to the computer. Let's go to the desktop, the Windows Defender, to see what's actually happening. From the protection history of the Windows Defender, we can see that the thread file actually the remediation incomplete. So let's say we click this remediation incomplete. So it will show that the virus, the malicious file, actually being removed and is blocked according to the Windows Defender ATP policy. So the action needed actually will show that it's also related to the Defender ATP policy. Yeah, and we can actually choose to quarantine or remove it. So let's say I choose to remove it. So here we can see that, yeah, it's running and actually being removed. Okay, now let's switch back. And we want to make this incident as resolved. You can actually, from here, you can click it to resolve the incident. And you can set a classification of the file. And the determination is which kind of the class is related to. You save it. And once you click save to resolve the case, the incident will actually disappear from the page. Okay, this is how Microsoft Defender for Endpoint can help to remediate the case. Hope you like it. Thank you. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint comes with a feature called Live Response, which it will help the IT admin to remote to the infected PC via the command prompt. In this scenario, assume the IT admin receive an incident case through the portal. He click to the problematic PC and further click on the initiate live response. Okay, this will link the IT admin to the PC through the live response command prompt. And assume that if you are new to this live response, you can start with the help command. So this will actually list down all the commonly used command. So example here, I use dir. It will list down all the files, folders in the C drive. So the next, we can try schedule tasks. So this schedule task will actually list down all the task schedule created in the PC. So you can double check whether you got any special task schedule created or not. So the next is about this command called connections. It is similar to the netstat. It will list down all the live connected apps which is happening in the PC. Okay, next I want to introduce is this find file. So assume that from the incident I found that I got this invoice.docm file and I want to find where is it located at. And finally I get it is from the desktop. And I can type another command called analyze file and then followed by the path of the entire file. Then this live response will start to analyze. Okay, so after analyze, it will actually list down whether the file is safe or not. Example here, this is the clean file. Okay, so the next, maybe I feel that I still not comfortable. I think it's better I quarantine this file. So I can type this command, remediate file, then followed by the path of the file. So once you hit enter, it will start to remediate by quarantine the file. And once completed, you will see that it shows that the status is quarantine, the status finish. Okay, this is how the live response can help you to solve the problem. And then it comes with the command log, which is the history of all the command you key in before in the same session. So example, the analyze, it will show the output. So the next example is this, the remediate. You also recorded the output of the command. Okay, the next thing, assume that you want to key in or you want to upload the script, PowerShell script to the PC. So you can use this upload function to upload the PowerShell command to the PC. And once you upload it, you can go back to the command console. And then you key in the command called library. Okay, so after you key in the command, it will list down the uploaded file into the PC. So to run the PowerShell, you can hit this run, then followed by the PowerShell name. So this will actually help to initiate the PowerShell and run it happen on that particular PC. Okay. Okay, once everything completed, before you leaving, you should click the disconnect session and this will disconnect the live session from the console towards the PC. Okay, well, this ended the live response demo session. Thank you very much. Hi, in this session, I will introduce a tool to you which is called RANSIM. This is a ransomware simulation tool, and this tool comes with a variety of the ransomware mutation. And let's say your computer cannot protect from this kind of ransomware attack. It will show as the red color vulnerable word, as what you can see. Okay, and as a result, the folders, the files inside KB4 C drive will be converted to become the ransomware encrypted files. Well, let's understand how the Windows Defender can be configured to protect from the ransomware attack. We first must make sure that the control folder access is turned on. And once turned on, you have to click into this protected folder and make sure that the folder you want to protect added into this protected folder. To start the simulation test, you need to open the RANSIM tool and click the Check Now button. And once run, you will see that the testing is started to run. And then you actually category by category to run it. And once completed, you drag down and you will see the results show as a green color, not vulnerable. But for those show in the yellow color, which is actually is a false positive test, but still the Windows Defender will block it. Okay, so as a result, you will see that those files in the C drive KB4 is actually still show as the original file and not being encrypted. Okay, this ended my demo session. I hope you benefited from it and you like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chua.
Thank you. I will pass the stage to Kenny to continue the exciting demo. Okay, over to you, Kenny. Thanks.
Thanks, Chua. Thanks for the awesome demo. Right, the ransomware attack and the simulation is really good. Right. Okay, so Chua showed from the perspective of the endpoint, right? And we are actually going to talk about end-to-end protection. Right. Have I shared my screen? Okay, right.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Let me share my screen. Sorry. Okay, so welcome guys. Thanks, Chua, for the awesome demo. All right. For my session, I'm going to talk a little bit about Azure Security Center as well as Azure Sentinel and how it can actually, from the perspective of moving from the endpoint, now it can move to the cloud, and how we can actually protect the cloud workload as well as hybrid workload, right? Because a lot of companies now are moving towards hybrid. And it's no longer just only on-premise. They're moving their workload to cloud, especially during this pandemic time. Everyone is pivoting and going through the whole digital transformation. All right. So it's a little bit about myself before I start. Just I'm a consultant and a pre-sales consultant, and I'm specialized a lot on virtualization, hybrid cloud as well. Now moving into security solutions. Okay. So you can reach out to me through LinkedIn. And okay, let me start. Protect your workloads from threats using Azure Security Center as well as Azure Sentinel. And this is what I'm going to talk about a little bit. And I'm just going to start with a few slides and then I'm going to jump into the demo. All right. So as you, I think Priyanka shared earlier a lot about how Azure, not Azure, about cloud security, how important cloud security is, right? And there are a lot of things to look into it, right? From compliance, from threats, from policies, and everything. How do we actually easily protect those cloud, right? Protect those workload, right? The solution is simple. We have something called Azure Security Center, which brings everything into a full cycle where we can actually manage from compliance to threats detection. It can also integrate with the solution that Chua shared just now regarding the Microsoft Defender for endpoint, as well as also it does protection against threats for servers. So it boils down to two sections here, all right? So firstly, it's a strengthened security posture. Azure Security Center is built to strengthen your security posture, where it will look into the cloud security posture management, secure score policies and compliance, things like that. I will go through a little bit deeper. And the second part is that it will look into the protection against threats for servers, for cloud native workloads, for everything within the Azure environment, as well as even multi-cloud and even on-prem servers, right? So it's a one-stop, one dashboard to actually look into your whole security environment of your organization, all right? So this is a very good tool that you can actually employ. All right. So firstly, the first part we talk about is inside workload assessment of the Azure resources with something called Secure Score, right? So it enables to actually gain instant insight into security state of your cloud workloads, because everything is important, right? However, you might not know which one comes in a priority, whether which one to actually address first. There are a lot of security things that you may need to look at. Azure security with this secure score helps you with that. It gives you ability to actually address security vulnerabilities with prioritized recommendations. So you know which one is more important. As an organization, you can look into that and fix that, and it will just go down. I will show you in a way later how does that kind of looks like. Improve your secure score and overall security posture in minutes, right? So it's just a checklist and done. And then you can actually improve the overall security of your environment, right? Secondly, is to protect your workload from threats. Use industry's most extensive threat intelligence to gain deep insights. All right, so what this does is that it not only look into your servers, it look into everything from the apps, VM, servers, the containers, SQL, IoT, network. So everything within the whole sphere of your cloud environment, as well as even on-prem environment, this tool can actually protect it. All right, protects data, so even Linux environment. All right, so that is the protect part of this solution. All right, and thirdly, I think I mentioned just now, protect hybrid data centers. It's not only just protecting cloud workload. All right, so it protects hybrid servers protection for data centers as well as other clouds. All right, so you can actually even onboard AWS servers onto this platform, even on board Google Cloud Platform. Yeah, right. So it's nowadays it's all about multi-cloud as well. No, it's not just one vendor, right? We understand that, and that's why the ability to actually integrate with another cloud is also there. All right, as well as onboard on-prem on-prem servers. So I'm gonna show that in a while later. All right, so I'm gonna jump into the demo right now, just to show you a little bit on Azure Security Center. All right, just now I talked about on-prem servers, right, as well as hybrid, right? I will just want to show you how easy it is to now want to on-prem and onboard actually an on-premise server into Azure Security Center, right? How easy is that? Okay, so very shortly, now this little demo here, and then I'll jump into the portal itself. All right, so I have here a file server, all right, and been managed by Windows Admin Center. All right, if you guys have not heard of Windows Admin Center, go download it. It's a free tool to manage your server environment, Windows Server environment, even manage your Windows 10 endpoints, right? And soon enough, you'll be managing Windows 11 as well as Windows Server 2022. This tool actually can manage all the way down to Windows Server 2008 R2. All right, so if you have an environment that you need to actually manage, you can use Windows Admin Center. All right, so how easy it is to actually onboard an on-prem server, right? It's just, you see here, it's just how easy it is. From here, Windows Admin Center, you can just jump straight into, there's a part here where you can do Azure Security Center. And what I did was just to step by step click, choose a subscription, choose the workspace name, click setup, and very easy, very fast. I manage on board an on-prem server to Azure Security Center. So now Azure Security Center has capability to protect this on-premise server as well. All right, this onboard Azure Security Center on the server has finished successfully. All right, what capabilities and what does that do? Right? Apart from just protecting the server itself, it also does analyze the process and analyze the server itself, and also kind of give you meaningful recommendations, right? So not long after I onboarded this server, this physical server, this virtual machine, I would say, but it's on premise, all right? I can see that the vulnerabilities are being given by Azure Security Center and what to fix it, such as vulnerabilities and security configurations on the machine, as well as system updates that should be installed on your machines. So it gives you a lot of recommendations and things on what to fix, all right? Okay, so that is how easy it is to onboard a server. All right. Okay, let me jump into the portal itself, and we'll start on my environment. All right. So over here is my security center. All right. Let me just see. This is the portal that usually when you enter into Azure portal. All right, and you will usually see that the security center will be up top somewhere around here about. All right. So the first thing you can do is just click on Security Center, and you bring you to this dashboard overview of Security Center. All right, and what this does is give you an overview of all your resources in terms of the Defender, in terms of secure score, in terms of regulatory compliance, and even insights into all the recommendations that you will scan through all your servers. All right, so this is how it looks like in the overview. I will slowly go into it one by one. So this first part here is secure score. All right, this is the one I talked about just now. All right, so secure score gives you a meaningful and recommendations, right, in terms of how secure your overall environment is. All right, this is my test environment, so it's not very secure. It's only 44%. All right, so they're looking into what kind of resources that is being protected, as well as the resource health, right? How many unhealthy and healthy, right? So it gives you an overview of what are the resources, and then it moves into some of the controls and some of the things that you can do in terms of your environment. All right, so it gives you the current score, and as you can see here, it gives you priority, right? The max score. So it's just telling you to enable what MFA. MFA is a multi-factor authentication. If you enable this, you will increase 10 score and 10 points, right? So this is asking you to actually increase and giving you priority, right? What is important to actually secure your environment. So it gives you overall potential score increase as soon as you implement some of this, right? And it gives you step by step. So 6 points, 5.3, and how do you do that? You slowly move into should be enabled, and then you go into securing your management ports. I've done some of it, but not all of it. So it gives you things to do step by step, right? So as an organization, you can really go into it, and it gives you a platform to actually secure your environment. Okay, so last but apart from that, just now mentioned over here, you can also, it doesn't only manage Azure, you can also see there's AWS here and GCP here, all right, a Google Cloud Platform. So, and as you onboard things like that, you can actually do the secure score and even encompasses other cloud environment, other cloud resources. All right, so that is secure score. Okay, very quickly, how do you actually onboard some of this multi-cloud environment, right? Such as connect. So easily from here, cloud connectors, I can actually integrate with Connect AWS account as well as Connect GCP account, right? I currently do not have, but this is how you do it. Okay, so moving from the secure score, I'm just gonna move a little bit to something called Azure Defender, right? So Azure Defender is where you can, the second part of it, where you can look into the threats, protect against threats, right? You will look into everything such as servers, storage, your resource manager, DNS subscription, and even all the alerts that it will be triggered by the endpoints itself, right? The servers. All right, so I can click on this and I can look into security alerts, right? So potential attempt bypass app blocker. So what I did was I actually have a server here that I actually attempted to run a command that is seen as a potential attempt to bypass app blocker. All right, so it's my test server in on premise. All right, so what I can do here is that I can look deeper into this problem here. Okay, so very much the same as a little bit same as what Troy shared, right? It can give you all the information, such as the what is the host, the username that was used to compromise this, account session ID, what is the process like, all right, and what was the command that was run. I actually went to the command line and I used this command, and when I ran it, it actually will be seen as analyze of a host potential attempt to bypass ad blocker restrictions. All right, so you can really go deep into it and find out what's going on here. If any suspicious people actually attempted to actually run some commands that it's not supposed to, right? You can see here and you can really trace, all right, from the host, process, and things like that. Okay, so that is the security alerts. Apart from that, I also have some security alerts here. You can also do some sample alerts here. Why do they give this sample alerts? It's so that companies can actually start their pipeline, meaning they can start to prepare before it happens, right? What happens in any of these cases happen, such as phishing content, potential SQL brute files. They give you a sample alert and you can work on this. You can even set up, take actions and see whenever this happens, what do you want to do? So you can actually prepare ahead, all right? Apart from that is that you can also see I ran some ransomware. I tried to run some ransomware tests and actually was prevented by this, right? And I can see the view details. All right, then you can see all the ransomware test file, the file hash, the host, the same things that can be seen here. All right. Let me just jump into it. Here is that also I can also see in terms of everything else from the advanced protection, from VM vulnerability assessment, just-in-time VM access, meaning I can actually set open a certain port for a certain short period of time, right? So let's see if I were to enable GMT, right? Okay. Okay, so these are the ports that are usually being used by administrators, right? However, all these ports being open, right, is actually a risk. All right, so this is actually a way for Zero Security Center actually blocks all these ports and actually needs a request from an authorized person before it opens. And you can even see that it opens for a short period of time, like 3 hours or 1 hour or 2 hours, so that after this period of time, you can actually blocks the access as well. So it adds more to what's the protection for it. All right. Apart from that, there's also network map, or I can look into the network environment and things like that. Okay. So very quickly, apart from this solution, I also want to jump into something called Azure Sentinel. All right. Azure Sentinel is an SIEM solution that also integrates together with Azure Security Center. All right, so you can see here that I have a lot of alerts here. I can see that all these alerts that have been prompted here, which is actually in conjunction with the Azure Security Center. But what you can do here now is you can also integrate with a lot of different solutions. All right, so what are the different solutions that I can connect to, right? Over here, I can actually do a data connectors. Okay, so everyone knows that a company doesn't only run on one vendor, right? So with as an SIEM solution, it actually enables you to actually input a lot of logs into this system that actually will actually integrate and do some correlations of events with all the other systems, right? So it's correlation. So what it does, you can see here that it also works with a lot with different companies such as Checkpoint, Cisco ASA, F5, all sorts of the different solutions, right? You can actually ingest all these logs and data and do correlations, right? And from there, you can easily just connect to solutions, right? Let me just show you some of the solutions I've connected. Okay, connected. I can see here Azure Active Directory. I have Azure Defender connected to it, right? As and when I have more solutions, I can actually integrate together and you actually correlate all these events together, all right? So let me just look into some of the incidents that was been look into it. And with this solution, I also can do some things like investigation to what happened, right? So one thing that I did just now was a potential attempt to bypass app blocker detected. So this is a high incident. All right, so what I do is that I can do a view full details. And then I do a investigation. All right, this is an investigation part here. So over here, you can see that it gives you a really nice looking map here on telling you that what was the potential attempt that happened, what was the alert, the events that happened, and even look into the server itself, right, on the alert related alerts. Okay, so let me just pull it up, right? I can see here there are a lot of alerts that will happen and things like that, right? So potential attempt, right? Privilege escalation bypass was done. Even a Windows security log was cleared, right? So this is seen as a evasive defense evasion, right? So one interesting thing that I can see here is I can do a timeline. And I can see that what happened in the timeline, right? Potential attempt bypass, all right? And then I can see that Windows security was cleared after that. And then it actually done a potential attempt bypass from the events. And then there was anti-malware action was failed. And then another anti-malware action was taken. So I can relate all these events in a very timeline manner and find out what actually happens as each event happens, right? And I can really go down deep into the events, right? So this is the power of Azure Sentinel. And as and when you actually integrate a lot more solutions into this, you can find out a lot more about the incident and what happened, right? Okay, so I hope that this gives you an overview of what is Azure Sentinel as well as Azure Security Center all about. Okay, I'm going to pass this time to Cole next, and he's going to really show you something exciting in regards to his journey on a security lockdown, right? And because Cole come from a end user environment, and it's very interesting to see how they actually do their lockdown, right? So Cole, let me pass this time back to you. Are you ready?
All right, thank you, Kenny.
Sure,
Let me
sure,
share
sure.
my screen first.
Sure. Over to you, Cole.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Thanks, Kenny and Chua, for the great demo presented. All right. Welcome, everyone. Once again, I'm Cole from CCK Consolidated Holdings. Basically, I'm for the end user segment. All right. Today, I'm going to cover 3 topics together with a bonus track. First of all, I will share my security adapting journey. After that, I will share some of our best practice regarding system lockdown for deployment. But last but not least, I will share how I'm preventing certain applications to run in Windows Server 2022 RDS VDI via the GPO. Alright, let's start. Struggling at current stage is normally where end user like us we're facing while maintaining our existing infrastructure. By taking a step forward in learning and exploring with technologies, better together with building connection with technology specialists, solution providers for different areas, take part in an event like Microsoft Virtual Training Days, Cybersecurity webinar, and even hands-on lab, allowing us to move forward, stay positive, stay connected, right, and ready for the opportunity to come. Right? With the time and effort we spend on learning, searching, and building up connection with technical expertise as well as partners, we take a step forward to evaluate and transform what we have learned to solution. And we work as a team to prove it and demonstrate the value of it toward company perspective. The day when the chance arrived, our team worked proactively on driving the deployment progress with smooth transition requirement taking into consideration as part of our migration strategy. As we always remember one thing, users plays a very important role in success story of any deployment. You may have a great solution, however, it will fail if your user acceptance are low. For any solution we deploy, fine-tuning and optimization always part of our process flow to make it success deployment. Monitoring, feedback collection, and execution are the key component of the progress. Users' experience and feedback is important criteria to bring deployment solution become better. While harvest fruitfully result from step taken, we start to think further on why certain solutions work and some are not. How we resolve it and what we have done to avoid the same issue that happens again. This why, how, and what thinking process bring a great answer to our team. It's called sharing. Sharing helps deepen our knowledge, grow our team spirit, and enlighten others. Sorry? Sorry, Amma?
But
can you hear me?
It's okay, Cole. Keep going.
Go ahead. I think, yeah, it's okay. Go ahead.
Right. Sharing helps deepen our knowledge, grow our team spirit, and enlightening others through knowledge transfer. Without further ado, please allow me to go further on showing how my team execute the system lockdown process before any system deployment. System lockdown is a protection setting and procedure that taking place to protect deployment system against security breach and vulnerability to eliminate the possibility of attacks. Let me go through it step by step with you all. First of all, we will upgrade the system BIOS as well as other controller firmware, followed by service pack and patches installation for respective system. I believe that all of you have watched the demo that did by Clement on the reason why it's so important to secure the BIOS and firmware for a particular machine. Secondly, we will go through a step to disable all administrative share, which enabled by default on majority of Windows system. After that, we will start to enable and installing endpoint security client into the system for add-on security purposes. Furthermore, we will be handling the firewall rules with our specific requirement, like hot access for specific resource or source address and so on. Moreover, we will also liberate the capability of group policy object to perform some lockdown requirement from policy layer. Most importantly, we will remove and uninstall those unnecessary applications and features as well as disabling unnecessary services in respective system. Finally, it's done and we are ready to deploy the respective machine by connecting it to the production network. That's all for me on the system lockdown perspective, and I do hope that this will work as a baseline practice for participants who need it during system deployment. Last but not least, let me turn into my third topics regarding Windows Server 2022 on RDS-VDI with GPO. Before I start, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Chua on sharing his well-configured environment for me to carry on with my demo presentation. For those who are interested to know more about RDS-VDI in Microsoft Windows Server 2022, please click on the link shared on the find the YouTube link shared by Chua on the screen below, which covering that interesting area. Right? Without further ado, let me start my demo on the security aspect of Windows Server 2022 with a GPO. This is the result that we're going to achieve by enabling GPO to virtual desktop user. Securing a DVI with will lift up it to a next level where we could have more control on the environment as presented. As an example, I can disable the access to command prompt, prevent user from running registry editor. Last but not least, allowing me to control in such a way selected applet will only show in the control panel as well. Without further ado, let me show what I mean. This is my testing machine. On my left is my DC and the RDS server. On my right is a thin client where I will access the remote section into the server. Right. Let me run the connection where it connected to the server. Right. So it's connecting. So this is connected by using my testing user's account. And this is a normal desktop without any lockdown or GPO control, where the user can run the command prompt directly, right? And at the same time, users can also search for tools, something like a registry editor, right? And this particular user can actually change the registry inside this VDIS virtual desktop, right? What if the user go to the control panel, right? All the control panel applet will show that allowing this user to use, right? So basically, user has full control on the system, and he and she will capable to do most of the thing that they want, right? So on top of this, I'm going to demonstrate how I applying a GPU on it and limit for this functionality, right? Basically, I will go back to the server, right? And I have a OU with my user account with no GPU control, right? So now I will move it to another OU, which is having a GPU control, right? So once I move it, I will show you basically what I have done on controlling on that particular OU with a selected GPO, right? Let me expand the user configuration template, right? So basically, in the control panel side, I only allow a certain selected applet to be run, right? In this example, I only allow region and date and time, right? So I only allow two. Furthermore, I'm also preventing the user from running the command prompt as well as the registry editor, right? So I proceed. After that, I will run the GP update, right, to let the policy to be applied, right. Please wait for a couple of seconds while the policy applied. Okay, it's done. So now we move on to the client machine where the thin client where I will connect back to the RDS server, right. So while the virtual desktop is loading, right, I'm using the same account. So you can see that I go back to the same virtual desktop. Now the user will try to open the command prompt, right? As an example, right? As you can see here, the command prompt has been disabled by administrator, right? After that, what if the user goes to the registry editor where he or she can access it previously? Well, it's been disabled as well, right? By the GPO that I had created. What if the user go to the control panel, right, to see what is available, right? Wow, looks fantastic, right? My GPU is working fine. That I have limiting the user from accessing only the applet that is allowed, right? So this is how we control the user session in a virtual desktop environment via the GPO. So that's all for me for the RDS and the VDI with GPO. Last but not least, let me walk you through a bonus track on how I open malicious mail and link and attachment by using a lightweight desktop environment to safely run them in an isolation mode. This lightweight environment mode is called Windows Sandbox. Let me walk you through and demonstrate to you how it works. So this is my desktop. So I have received a request from my colleagues. And I have received a request from my colleague where they have some mail with a suspicious link, and there's also some mail with an unknown attachment. And they are asking for my advice whether they are safe to open such a mail. So in order for me to set it up to open that particular mail, so I will not going to harm my existing host machine as well as my local network. So I will use the Windows Sandbox and open those mail into it. Let me start my Windows Sandbox. It will take a little bit while. Let me expand it. So I will access my mail account directly inside the sandbox. So let me go to my webmail. Some the credential. So this I demonstrate how I access directly to the mail server. Then I open the mail directly from here via the Windows sandbox. So here's the attachment. I will download it and put in the local drive. So I will open this directly. Oh, since that this is a zip file, so I will extract it. However, there is another zip file inside the zip file. So I will unzip again. This is a dual layer zip file. After that, I realized that there is a exe file, or executable file that's going to run. Unfortunately, it has been blocked by the Windows Defender, and because I'm running this in the Windows Sandbox, so it's pretty safe where it doesn't affect my own machine and my own network. Okay, so this is a file that has a very dangerous code binder on it, so it's not safe to be opened. What about the link, the mail with the link that has been forwarded by my colleagues? So I should text it up this particular link. I copy and I open a new tab and then paste it in and to see where does it go. Wow, the link actually goes to a site where require a user authentication look like Microsoft login. However, if you look at the domain name, it doesn't point to any Microsoft server. Therefore, I will consider that this is a phishing mail, although it's running on the secure layer. So basically what I do is I will inform my colleagues and tell them that this two mail is not safe to be opened and kindly discard it and delete it immediately. So this is how we try to run those dangerous, malicious files in an isolated environment to have protection, and to be not going to harm our own system and network. So once it's done, you may cross the sandbox directly, and it will pop up a message saying that everything will be gone after you cross it. It will be deleted permanently. So that's good. This is what we want, and this is how it works to protect our action taken. So it's closed and it's done. So let me show you how simple it is to enable the Windows Sandbox. So what you need to do is you can enable the feature for the turn Windows feature on and off. Menu. That you just select and enable the Windows Sandbox feature by selecting it and click on the OK to restart your machine, and that's all. That's what you need. So that's a simple way to enable the Windows Sandbox. So I hope you enjoy all the different scenario or the demo that I created for you. I share I started with sharing about my security adapting journey. And of course, right after that, I shared the state of our best practice on system lockdown. And then finally, I showed you a little bit out of my experience with GPO control on Windows Server 2022, RDS DBI, and of course, the Windows sandbox for running those suspicious code in isolated environment. That's all for me. Thank you so much for joining us. Without further ado, I will pass the session back to Noel, where he will continue the sharing about HPE and Microsoft are better together from a security perspective. Over to you, Noel.
Thank you, Cole. Thank you. We are running pretty late. All right. We appreciate all of you who have stayed on with us. We know that time is precious, and we're trying not to overdo what we have planned. But I don't know. Sometimes, even when we are trying so hard to stay on track, right, we still overrun. So I'm just going to cover a couple of slides just to, if you want, formalize some of the important pieces, if anything, to summarize the bits that we have covered. All right, and just let me share my screen to do that.
Ko, can you actually unshare your screen, Ko? Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Sorry, I'm just messing around with the stuff for the next event. All right. So I'm sure many of you saw the earlier session that Proven and Clement talked about the ILO, right? I think that's an important part with the Silicon Road of Trust to protect your firmware, right? And of course, he also covered off the areas of protect, detect, and recover, a very important part of ensuring that you can come out of it. From a Windows Server perspective, we also talked about some of the capabilities, right? Especially from the cloud, right? We didn't get as much time this time around to talk about the on-prem stuff, but trust me, the on-prem stuff is as exciting, right? And we managed to get code to show a little bit from a round the corner version, if you want, of Windows Server, right? And of course, this multi-layered security capability that already been presented hard and fast in 2019 gave us an opportunity to see how we can layer on top of the hardware, right? So with the firmware being protected with the Silicon Road of Trust in the middle, right, using the ILO 5, plus even some of the best practices that Priyanka and also Clement shared, right? I think together with these protect, detect, respond around security, around the OS, around virtualization and so forth, plus a whole slew of capabilities, right, that are available out of the box as well as beyond the box into the cloud from Microsoft, as you saw through Chua and Kenny. I believe we have an opportunity to understand that HP provides potentially the most secure server with the Gen 10 and 10 Plus using Windows Server. All right, and of course, from a solution perspective, you have the server with the ILO 5, and you have the software from a Windows Server perspective, and even Windows Admin Center that was briefly mentioned earlier by Kenny. And of course, the services either internally or through your partners, right, be able to help you with deployment and even support, right? Like what we got code to share was how internally they built up their readiness to do a certain amount of deployment themselves. And of course, even going to a hyper-converged scenario, the solution using the Windows Server Data Center Edition continues to be really strong and filled with security, all right, to provide you a highly secure environment, even when you want to go down the path of VDI, right? So these are the important pieces, and I'm not going to talk too much about this for the next event, but it's important to note that there's a lot of exciting stuff for IT to come alongside with the business to power it, to take it to new heights, right? This is something that we want to just give you a little bit of a trailer if you want, all right? So there are 4 key areas that we want to cover. The new normal industries, that means industries that are affected by the new normal, if you want, with COVID, but yet they are thriving. if you want, one of that is in the food industry. Of course, healthcare is the other, right? And you're working with a possible third industry as well. Of course, you want to understand what are the business critical systems. You want to understand how they manage their customers and so forth, and also their end user, right? From an end user computing perspective. So that's where you saw some of the things that Cole was showing, right? How they prepare themselves and so forth. You'll take that to new heights, right? So that you get a deeper understanding of how to provide all of that. And from a hands-on perspective, I just want to give you a little bit of insights, right? For the BizIT hands-on will be focused entirely on disaster readiness. And why that is important, if you want, is because without disaster readiness, all your hard work, if you want, right, will be lost. Okay, so it's important for us. So in order to not take more of your time, I just wanted to end the session, right, today by thanking all of you for joining us. All right. Sadly, we have to take out bits and pieces here and there, and apologize to Amar. We worked hard to get some stuff to show you. All right. But because of time constraint and so forth, we're going to reserve that for maybe a bonus session somewhere between now and the Biz IT session. So thank you so much for all of you for staying with us all the way to the end. We really like your help to fill in the feedback form, because as I always urge the team, we need to get onto this continuous improvement methodology, if you want. And in order to make that effective, we need to hear from you. We need to understand what worked and what didn't, right? And I know the fact that we didn't keep the time, I know that hurts, right? Because that's taking you away from your other activities, or you may have to exit, right, and go to the other activity and therefore miss the last bit. But the good news is we have this recorded. Okay, so stay tuned. We'll make sure that the video gets to you. All right, back to you, team. All right.
Thank you, Noel.
Clement, any last messages you want to give?
Thank you guys. Thanks a lot for your time. I second whatever Noel said. I don't want to repeat anything of that. Since we have inched into your lunch and your timing, thank you. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll definitely catch up in the next opportunity. Have a great time. Stay safe. God bless.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Amar. Thanks, Clement.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you everyone for staying with us throughout the session, and thank you to all the speakers for their exciting presentations. Before we end the session, we would appreciate if you can complete a post-webinar Okay, thank you everyone for staying with us throughout the session, and thank you to all the speakers for their exciting presentations. Before we end the session, we would appreciate if you can complete a post-webinar survey for us. This will help us to make the next session a better experience for you. We've actually dropped the link in the chat box, and you may click on it to access the form. Alternatively, you may also scan the QR code as shown on the holding slide